Hi there, my name is Gisèle Grenier. I'm a mixed media and portrait artist living in Ontario, Canada. Welcome to my studio. Today you will learn how to create these sketches shown on the screen. Now the art kit that you have includes a set of step-by-step instructions, but in this video you will get the opportunity to learn a wide variety of techniques to help you along. Now at the end of the video there's going to be some information there so you can get access to free tutorials and free projects available on my website. So don't forget to check that out. So you ready? Let's get started by moving over to the drawing table. The first feature we're going to be drawing is the nose. So I have my line drawing and I transferred it onto the paper. You can also freestyle this if you want. And I have a piece of scrap tracing paper, and that's going to be in between my hand and the drawing paper, and this will just prevent any of the natural oils from transferring to the drawing paper. And we're going to use 3 pencils. You are free though to use whatever pencils you want to experiment, but for this particular lesson I'm going to be using a 5H, which is a very hard pencil, an H, which is mid-range, and a 2B, which is a little bit softer, and they're freshly sharpened. And I'm also going to be using some blending stumps. And then we have our pencil sharpener, which you'll have to make sure your pencils are always sharp, and our vinyl eraser. I'm going to start with the 5H pencil. Now what I did when I transferred the drawing, I used the 5H pencil basically just to create a very light outline. You don't want to create your lines too dark because the nose is shaded throughout the whole piece. We don't have any really hard lines except the bottom of the nose and then the nostrils. Okay, so we just create a very light outline just so we can see what we're doing. Okay, you see that I'm not making anything smooth, just getting the general shape. And again, the features that we're going to be drawing are just based on a particular drawing I did. The best way to experiment is you can go through magazines, even online, and look for grab pictures of people, even movie stars, and just block out with paper everything on the outside and just focus on one particular element. Then we're going to work with our H pencil now, and we're going to basically add some tone throughout the entire nose because the whole nose is shaded. So I'm just going to start adding some lines. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just doing little hatching lines, which are short. These are short choppy strokes. And then if we work in the opposite direction, this becomes a cross hatching line. Okay, the other stroke is a circular stroke like this. I really like this one when I draw skin tones. Okay, and this technique can be used with graphite and with colored pencil as well. Okay, so you're just going to basically create a tone, and I'm just going to go here just to show you a nice way. Just see where I'm holding the pencil very lightly. You don't want to press too hard. I'm building up the side of the nose. Okay, so then I'm going to do some cross hatching, and when you do the cross hatching is where the lines intersect. That's where it's going to be really, really dark. I'm just going to work outwards. Take your time when doing this. When you're doing this exercise for the first time, it may take you, who knows, it may take you an hour to do this, but just take your time. I'm just doing everything. You see I'm kind of working with the direction of the nose, because where the nose is from here to here, it's just skin. Look at your own nose in the mirror and it's just skin. There really isn't any hard edges except for here, and then there's the ball of the nose. Okay, now see, I drew a line that's a little bit hard. Then what I can do is I can take my vinyl eraser and I could just very lightly, very lightly, just touch, and it just lightens everything up. Do not use your hand to wipe the eraser particles. Just tap the paper onto over a garbage can or on the side part of your table. Because if you wipe with your hand, you're going to smudge all the graphite. Okay. And I can even hold my pencil further down, almost flat to the paper. And I'm using more of the actual lead part. And it creates a very soft, very soft tone. Okay, so there's a bunch of different techniques that you can experiment with. So if this is the side of the nose, and then this now becomes part of the bridge of the nose, we can continue on this side. We just repeat the exact same thing that we did. We're only going to go to about here though. And when you're doing your sketching, it's really a good idea to work in an art journal or a sketchbook and just keep practicing and doodling. Now you see this line, we can see that line there. That line's eventually going to disappear because we're going to be doing some blending as well. Okay, and I'm just going to use a little bit of cross hatching. I'm going to go right across everything because this area is fairly dark. And how dark and how light you want an area is completely up to you. Some people like to do their sketches with a very light tone, like almost like more white gray. And some people like high contrast, where they use a lot of graphite. That's completely up to you how much contrast that you want to use. And I'm just going to turn my paper. And that's another thing, is to experiment how you turn your paper when you're doing your sketching. Some people feel more comfortable with drawing their strokes away from them, and some people feel more comfortable pulling the strokes towards them. That's completely up to you how you want to do that. And with the nose, basically, I'm going to do one half of the nose, and then when we come back, I'll have the other half completed because it's just a mirror image. And when you're doing your facial features, I'm just showing you what works for me, where I like working the shape of the feature, and then I get the tone in, and then I do a little bit of shading, and I start doing some accenting. I kind of work on the whole thing all at once, so that way it's uniform. But if you prefer working with details right away, that's totally fine. And when working around the nose, see right here, I'm kind of doing that same little hatching stroke, but I'm putting a little bit of a spin on it, a little bit of a curve, which gently darkens it. Same thing here, because this is a hard edge, so we don't need to worry about erasing that. Okay. This though, this will all eventually just disappear. This will just be blended. See, I was working here, then I worked up here, and as I go through, I'll work the whole thing at once. Then I would come here. This though, let me just erase this. That line's a little too dark. And then here I can also just lightly touch. See, I'm kind of just tapping the eraser up and down. That just erases the line. And then I can come in here. Right now the nose looks like it's furry, but we're going to be blending all that together. And that's the other thing is to consider, is that I strongly suggest that you practice using all the techniques that I'm showing you, and then you can do the nose again without using the blending stump. Just use your pencil. So you'll have one with the pencils only, one using the blending stumps to blend. Because if you haven't done any drawing before, any sketching, that's the only way you'll find out what works for you, is by experimenting. Okay, I'm just going to come here a little bit more. And the ending, the direction, I like to work with the direction that I'd like to say that the object is growing, so the nose comes out this way, so that's the way I'm going to do the drawing. And let's see, now the eyes are up here somewhere. We're not going to be drawing the eyes on this one, but I did put the outline of the mouth just so we have some placement. And I'm just going to emphasize this part here and just get a little bit of a shadow going. And while you're drawing as well, when you're doing your sketching your facial features, at any time if you feel that your hands are getting a little bit tired, then you need to stop. Stretch your hands out too while you're drawing, before you start, before you pick up that pencil, just to stretch out your hands. I have yet to meet a first-time student that doesn't grip that pencil so tight, because they want to do a really, really good job. And a good job will naturally take place when you practice and just relax and just enjoy the process. Okay, so I'm just gonna make that a little bit darker. My lines here are darker than what they should be because I want you to be able to see it on camera. And this is out a little too far. I'm just going to lightly go over with the eraser. And there we go, that's better. And I'm going to bring this in. And I'm going to show you how to do some touch-ups on here as well. And we can use some circular strokes as well. The circular strokes I really like doing over a hatching, which evens everything out. Because when you're using the different shapes, the different styles of the strokes, it tends to fit. The graphite goes inside the pores of the paper. And that way you get a much more even tone. So basically you're going to be adding a tone of graphite over the entire nose. And although in the actual photograph that we're working from, this is much lighter, we use the eraser to add light, so we would just pull some of the graphite out. And I just want to get a little bit, enough graphite on the paper, because when we start doing our shading with our blending stump, you'll see how that magic tool really does work wonders. So on this side I'm using the circular stroke just to give you a different method. Like I say, there's all these different types of strokes that you can use. Now I'm using the circular stroke with the pencil flat down on the paper. There's all these different things that you can do with the pencils. The only thing I can really suggest is that when you're doing this, if we're going to be using the blending stump, don't use, let's say, the 5H pencil to do this step, because the 5H is too hard. The graphite's too hard to be able to blend really softly. And we'll just work a little bit of graphite in here. And I'm also going to show you how we can grab graphite from an area of the drawing to load our blending stump. And that's why I did the drawing, the nose over here, and I left all this blank, because I'm going to use this as a practice area. And in here, this is the face. And I'm just going to put a little bit of tone here, a little bit lighter than what's on the actual nose, because I don't want to lose my shape. You see I'm just very lightly, almost no pressure, letting the weight of the pencil guide how much pressure goes on the paper. Same thing here. You can see I'm just holding it. If you press too hard, if you have to make any touch-ups, they'll be too hard to correct. Another great tip, if you happen to have Royal Brush has this brush. They have mop brushes, but there's a really nice brush. It's called a Large Area Artist Brush, and it's very inexpensive. It's made of goat hair. You can use that to wipe off the eraser particles as well. Okay, so we have a little bit of graphite in there. I'm just going to bring this in a little bit more. Believe it or not, this is the hardest part, what I'm doing here. It's also the part that needs the most patience, because you're starting to see the actual nose being developed. We're not drawing any hard lines. But you can also see as I'm adding more and more graphite, it's getting darker and darker and darker. Now that we have a bit of graphite laid down here, now we're going to take our blending stump. Now there are 3 different sizes, and what I like to recommend is that you use the largest blending stump possible. So for the area here, for general large areas, yes, you can use a large, and for small areas, we're going to use the little one. Now before I start, I forgot to do one thing. Let's take our 2B pencil, freshly sharpened, and we're going to use a circular stroke, and we're going to fill in the nostril. Just like so. Let me just turn the paper. The general techniques I'm showing here can be used, like I said, you can use them to experiment on drawings of people. You can use family photographs and just put a piece of paper over all the other elements just so you can practice the features. Okay, so I'm going to take the small blending stump now. Now watch what happens. So when you've got the area here, and the minute you go in, I'm using relatively the same pressure as I did with the pencil. You don't want to push too hard, because anytime you push too hard with any tool, you make correction much more difficult. And with the blending stump, as I'm going over, the area becomes darker, and you'll notice that there aren't any more little white flecks in here. So this is just with the 2B pencil, and this is with the blending stump. The blending stump pushes the graphite around into all the pores of the paper. One way to explain why the using a blending stump fills in the pores, if we picture this being the paper, and the paper's pores are like this, and this is a big exaggeration, when we do our sketching, we're really just touching the top parts of the pores, the little mountain peaks. And as we create hatching, cross-hatching, and circular strokes, and adding multiple layers, the graphite finds its way inside these little valleys. Where the graphite doesn't hit, that's where we get those little white, those little, what I call those little speckles. And the speckles are areas of the paper that don't have any graphite in them. When we use a blending stump, we're taking the graphite around here and we're literally pushing it inside all these little pockets. And that's why the areas, when you're doing your sketching, becomes much smoother, and those little speckles disappear. See that? How easy is that? Now we have a blending stump that's loaded with graphite. Okay, this is called a dirty blending stump. And watch this. We can take that blending stump and come in and just start to gently, very little pressure, add some shading. I'm still using the same blending stump, and the dirty graphite that's in there, not the dirty graphite, the graphite that's in the blending stump, this is a dirty blending stump because it's got the graphite in it. Between that and the graphite that's already on the paper, you get a very, very, very light tone. Okay, and be very aware though to do this blending very, very lightly. If you use too much pressure, you won't be able to do any touch-ups. Still using the same blending stump. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to define the shape. So I'm visualizing where the actual lines are for the nostril. I'm borrowing some graphite, coming in here. Okay, and turn this around. Now at this point now, let's say that this is just too small for this large area. I want to work with a larger blending stump. It is already a dirty stump. There is graphite in there, but let's pretend there isn't any graphite in here. If you have an area that the value is absolutely perfect, so let's say, and the value is the lightness or darkness of something. So in this case, this is a very dark value. If it's perfect and you don't want to touch it, you can create what I call a loading zone by using scrap paper. So we'll just use this side of the paper here, and I can use the 2B pencil. The 2B pencil is really a good go-to. So I'll just put some graphite on here, take my blending stump, and this is actually a good idea as well to practice. Okay, and then you can come in here and then you can do some further blending like so. I'm going to take a little bit more and just start filling that in, and you can see where this is here. I can go right inside, and this is how we're going to basically define the shape. I'm so very lightly, just gently gliding the blending stump. And I can darken just a little bit more by coming down here. And I can use circular strokes as well. See how that just darkens that in there? Bring that down. Okay. And I'm just going to round this out a little bit more. I went a little bit too far here. Oops. Oops, oops, oops. Don't forget the paper. And just bring that this way here. Now, that's correct something. So this part here, I need to correct that. What do we do? First of all, you can clean your eraser off a little bit like this, and you can also see how that's really black. Just go over some scrap paper and that will clean that eraser. Okay, here we go, and then just pick off that in there. And there's a kneaded eraser in the kit, and sometimes I like to use the vinyl better because you've got these lines here and you can get into some really tight spots. And I'm just going to, again, using a circular stroke and just so carefully and gently just touching over the graphite. If you press too hard, these lines are going to be very difficult to remove. So just be aware of that when you're doing the any work on your paper. And then I can just use a blending stump and blend around the area. I'm using circular strokes here. You see, didn't quite erase everything, but that's okay because I have to deepen the shadow there anyways. So I'm not gonna retouch that up. Otherwise, I just go back and touch it up again. But I need to deepen that shadow. And just use a circular stroke and basically repeating what's there. You can also use the flat side of the blending stump, but look what's happening. The graphite here created some little circles. So I would recommend that you work with a clean blending stump. And I'm just going to turn around and grab, you can use a sanding block over a garbage can and just wipe your blending stump over the sanding block, and that will also clean it. And just using circular strokes. I like using circular strokes when blending out skin tone because it makes it a little bit more even. At the end, I'll show you the vinyl eraser and how we can use it to blend out blending with the vinyl eraser, I should say. You can use the vinyl eraser for erasing and blending, as well as the kneaded eraser. But I find the vinyl eraser, this one here, has a little bit more flexibility when it comes to getting into some tight areas. So for large areas, this blending stump is really good. And what we want to do now is we want to even further darken this outside edge. Okay, so all the outside darken, then work towards the center, and the lightest area will be here, and think of an invisible ball right here, which is the tip of the nose. So I'm just going to grab my pencil here, and I'm going to use my 2B pencil. Now I want this to be a little bit darker, and I'm just going to go right here. This is the shadow. Now watch when I work with the blending stump right away. The 2B pencil is a really good pencil for blending because the graphite is not too hard and not too soft. And that's the key, is you need to be able to work with graphite that is soft enough to be able to blend. So with the hard pencils, it's really kind of pointless because the graphite is so hard. Okay, and I'm going to take the 2B pencil. Now I'm going to really darken this area right in here. This is where kind of the nostril kind of juts in into the face. Okay, and use the blending stump very lightly. Just going to blend that out, and I think that's a pretty good value, because now what I can do is I can go with the H pencil and just, because this is a lighter area, and just go over everything and use the blending stump and blend that a little bit more. So I use the pencil as well to do some blending. Just work towards the center. Circular strokes. See how it really shades that area? Keep that around. And if I lost the line, I'm going to get my 5H, and I'm just going to define that line a little bit more. I lost it a little bit. I can use the eraser to tighten that up. And wouldn't worry too much about the erasing for the shapes around here, because you still have to add tone to everything else. So during the break, I filled in the other side of the nose, and you can see it's really started to take shape. And now it's just a matter of just doing refining. Now, in written instructions can be laid out one way, and in the video I'm showing a lot more techniques. So the order that you do things really depends on how you want to do it. The nostrils can be done in the beginning or in the end, but I did them in the beginning because I want to show you how you can borrow graphite to do the blending, where the written instructions say to do the nostrils at the end. So again, it's completely up to you. The one thing though I do highly recommend is when you're doing the project is to work on the whole piece at the same time. That way you can see the whole thing develop instead of just focusing on just one area. Okay. And I think I'm going to go to the 5H pencil because I want to show you something. When we're drawing our tone, when we're laying out our tone using our hatching, the lighter the pencil, the lighter the graphite. Okay, so the H's are hard, the graphite is light. The B, think of it as black, is darker. Okay, so you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6B, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5H. Okay, so the 5H is a very light pencil. You can use the lightest pencil, and you can go back over an existing layer of softer graphite to blend as well, instead of using a blending stump. Love using this technique. Now, remember I was saying we want to start dark and want to work towards the middle. We can use that 5H with circular strokes. And again, I'm using the gravity is what's doing all the work with the pencil. The weight of the pencil is being used naturally. I'm not pressing at all. If, though, I have to say, if you're getting to an area like this, I do want to use a little bit of control instead of going just willy-nilly. So let's just do that. And so I can show you how to add light. Let's cover the entire area. You may not be able to see the graphite taking place. So I'm going to use some hatching strokes now. So I use some circular strokes. Now I'm using some hatching. And then I'll come in now with some cross hatching. And you'll be able to see that it's very, very slowly a beautiful tone starting to appear. Patience. Enjoy the process. And I know that if this is your first time using pencils, really appreciate what you're doing here. You're creating something from nothing. You're taking a pencil and you're creating something dimensional on a piece of paper. Now, if we're doing, I call these drawings. To me, a drawing is something very refined, and a sketch, to me, is something fast. The term sketches and drawings are different with all artists around the world. And there's also a term called rendering, and a rendering, to me, I like using charcoal for doing that. And if I did a charcoal rendering, I would use a charcoal and render this, and then use my fingers to blend. So that's basically to me, that's a rendering. Some people would call that a sketch. Whatever term you want to use, stick with that. But just wanted to explain that there are people call things differently. Okay, so see how that's really coming into play. And I want to, the nose right about here, it's much brighter here, so I'm just going to, now I'm using a little bit more pressure. And yes, we could go to, let's say, a 4-3 or even a 2H pencil. We could do that, but let's see what we can do with a limited number of pencils. What I would like to suggest to you, though, is experiment. Do this project with different pencils, with different blending techniques. That's the only way that you'll really learn what your favorite technique is. I'm showing you a bunch of different ones, and you may find that you find one that you really, really enjoy, so then stick with that. But at least try them so you can get a feel. And you don't have to stick to one technique all the time. For example, when I'm creating artwork of faces, sometimes I will use just the pencil to blend, and sometimes I will use the blending stump. There isn't any rule. The only rule, we don't have any drawing police around here. The only rule is basically just to relax and enjoy the process. If you're tense, it will show in your drawing. Okay, see how that's coming together? And then we're going to come back and we're going to further darken the outside edge. So see how just gradually, I mean, I could have done this much faster by using, let's say, an HB pencil and just use a blending stump, but I want to show you all the different things that you can do. A little bit more pressure. And with the 5H, you can use a little bit more pressure on the side. If you're using heavy pressure this way, you will put a gouge into the paper, and there is no fixing that, unless you're purposely doing that. And now while I'm doing this, 'cause this is going to take a couple of minutes, and as you're drawing, this is going to happen, you really shouldn't have your food on your drawing table. I've got a piece of masonite, fresh piece of masonite, because my table is actually glass and it's very cold on my hands. So I have a piece of masonite here, and I also have a coffee that's about 3 feet away. You really shouldn't have food in your art studio, but if you're working in your kitchen, of course you're going to have food in the kitchen. Just be careful that your coffee cup is way on the side, because when you erase or you, let's say, tap away the eraser particles, you don't want those particles ending up in your food. I participated in a workshop last weekend, a painting workshop, and people were eating their meals while they were painting. I don't recommend that, but just from a safety standpoint. The one thing is you don't want to inhale graphite particles. Okay, see how that's being built up? Now I'm going to use some cross-hatching. Nice and slow. And I'm keeping this part relatively light, because this, imagine the ball, this is the ball of the nose. One suggestion, heavy suggestion. If you're going to be working from photographs, and let's say that you're going to be using photographs of your family members, I would discourage that in the beginning. Myself, and I know some students, that when, back quite a few years ago, when you use pictures of family members or friends, you tend to be overly critical and you want to make things absolutely perfect. And then, when you show your artwork to that person, artwork is all subjective. They may not like it, and it could be, if I looked at it, it could be absolutely stunning. So I would suggest that you work from photographs that you don't have any attachment to. So you can, the best one are movie stars, even ones that you don't know. I really like to draw Angelina Jolie, because she has the most beautiful features on her face, and she has different, when she does her makeup, differently. She has beautiful effects on her eyes and stuff like that. So that she's a wonderful, wonderful subject to work from. Now I'm just going to continue adding a little bit more tone here, just to build up a little bit of the face. I'm just using the same 5H pencil. I'm just using cross hatching to build up some tone. Another celebrity I love to draw is Johnny Depp. But pick somebody that you like. If you like the celebrity, then you may have an attachment to it, and you might want to try to be overly critical. And children are also much different in facial shapes than adults, so that'll be a nice challenge for you as well. But you can get lots of reference photographs. The only thing you have to be careful though, if you're using photographs that you didn't take, be aware of copyright. So use it for personal use, but always check the terms. If you're using photographs from the internet, check the terms of use. But celebrities are fantastic. There's lots of websites out there. See how that's nice and formed now? I'm just going to turn this upside down, and I just want to do a little bit more here. Now, see, for me, this is more comfortable because the tip of the pencil allows me to work the edge. Circular strokes. There we go. And I'm just going to come around here. Imagine that ball. There's a ball here. Imagine the ball. There we are. How lovely is that? So as we do our drawing, now I'm going to come in. Let's go with the H pencil. Now this is where I'm veering off a little bit from the written instruction because I can show you a lot more. So the H pencil is right about in the middle of between the hard and this the beginning pencil of the hard side. And I can take the H pencil and I can come right in here, and I'm just going to use that same circular stroke. And I'm just going to, it's a circular stroke, but it looks like I'm going back and forth. I'm doing this. I'm exaggerating the stroke, okay? If you work too slowly when you're creating the tone, if you work too slowly, you may find that at some parts where you stop, the pressure will change on the pencil and you'll end up with a mark, okay? That's why I like working fast, and I'm always changing direction. That way it's uniform. Now you'll also notice I didn't put paper underneath my hand. I have developed my own habit of lifting my hand above the paper, and sometimes I'll use my pinky to support my hand. I always still suggest that you have the paper underneath. When you've done your entire drawing, we're going to work towards doing the nose, the mouth, the eyes, hair, and then then I'm going to show you a bonus video about putting together a face. And when you're working on this, now I can tell you right now, if you were to put the paper on top of here and you're working somewhere else over here, you're going to be fine. Just lift the paper up. If you start dragging your tracing paper over your drawing, you will start to smudge. So just be aware of that. See, I'm just starting to really refine. If your style, now about some style. Now this is where I can do a lot of talking with this because this does take time with all the layers. If you're developing your own style, which is what you will do over time, you may find that this is too detailed. You want something a little bit more freestyle. Adjust the instructions to your own use, so you don't need to put in as many layers of graphite. You don't need to be as careful. You will develop your own style, trust me. I just would avoid you to use, and I suggest checking out other artists as well. That's the way you'll learn. Just avoid using one artist's technique as carved in stone, because then you won't really develop your own style. You can combine a bunch of different styles. You don't need to be restricted to only one style. Okay, see how beautiful that is? And I just want to put a little bit more, and I'm going to come down here. I just want to shade that tip a little bit more. There we go. And I'm just going to hold the pencil up a little bit more now. And I'm just going to darken just a little bit. Okay. And let's see. And then now it's just a matter, you can still do a little bit more shading and stuff like that. And I'm just going to shade a little bit more here. It's actually not shade, it's tone. Now, the amount of graphite you apply as well will depend on the color of the skin, whether you're painting drawing Caucasian skin, reddish brown, brownish black, ivory. The best way to determine when you take a photograph that's in color, convert it to black and white. Most printers now, when you print, will have a feature of printing only in grayscale. That will make it so much easier for you to be able to interpret a photograph, a color photograph, in black and white. So let's pretend now don't do this, I just want to show you. So I'm going to cover up the white ball here that's here. And it's going to cross hatch it. Now, if you want to practice this, just practice it in your sketchbook or in a scrap piece of paper. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you have a sketchbook handy for doodling, drawing, sketching, rendering. Okay, I'm going to take my blending stump now. Like I said, don't do this unless you want to practice, because I want to show you how to do something. So I applied a tone to everything, and I was chatting with my friend, and I really wasn't paying attention as to the area that I shouldn't have applied any graphite to. And I'm just going to quickly blend all of this. Okay. And you can also use, let me just show you, we're going to reach over. You can also use a Kleenex. And the Kleenex, what I like to do is double up that Kleenex and wrap it around my finger. Okay. You can also use the Kleenex. Use very little pressure with that. This is great for large areas. Okay. Very little graphite came up. So we've got that. Oh no, I covered up a highlight. What do I do? Well, you can take your vinyl eraser and remember that little circular stroke. Let gravity take the eraser to pull it down, and I can just use that vinyl eraser, and I can also right about in the middle. I'm not pushing, I'm letting gravity do all the work. Right in the middle. There we go. And what you're doing is you're bringing the light back. Okay. There we are. And I'm doing this ever so slowly. And every once in a while you do need, this is really easy to clean, just wipe it on scrap paper and just pick off the piece there. Do it ever so slowly. So this is why you need to use a very light touch when you're working with graphite, so erasing is possible. You can even come here and just do a little highlight like that. We're going to use this technique, what I just showed you here, when we're going to be working on, let's see, I'm thinking the eye for sure and the hair. That's a for sure, even the mouth. And let's just kind of finish off this drawing here. Let's just fill in the lips a little bit. Just an outside edge. I'm not going to actually do any formal lesson here on the lips. It's just to get a shape put in. There we go. Just a shape put in there. So there we go. So there's a beautifully done nose. And now what I'd like you to do is do a few of these in your sketchbook and just practice, and sometimes use your pencil, use your blending stump, use different pencils just to see all the different values that you can get with this. Okay, then once you're done, I mean, you don't have to do that right now. You can do it over a period of days. What I like to do now is clean off my table and bring out the next piece that we're going to work on, which will be the eye. The eyes are extremely important in a sketch. So because of the soul of the person you're drawing, we're going to work this exercise very slowly. And the most important thing is to make sure your pencils are always sharpened. So this is the sketch that we're going to be working from as our reference. And you have that included in your project. Now, what you don't see here is, you may not see, is I've got the line drawing here. This is a little bit darker than it should be, and it's strictly for video purposes. So in the written lesson, the eye is facing one way. In the video, the eye is facing the other way. That way you'll have two pieces of reference to work from. So you're going to transfer your line drawing to your paper, and before you start doing your drawing, you're going to make sure your hands are freshly washed and don't put any cream in your hands to avoid oils transferring to the paper. You'll also need your piece of tracing paper to stay in between your hand and your paper. That'll also prevent the oils from transferring. So the first thing we're going to do is with our number 5 pencil, 5H pencil, you're going to go over what you transfer just to make sure you've got the lines where you can see them. So down here, I just need to just make a little bit of an adjustment here, because sometimes when you're transferring the lines, you do miss some spots, but this is fairly easy to adjust. And I'm going to bring this down a little bit more. And this is actually going to come out a little bit more. Okay, so it's something like that. And I'm going to switch now to my H pencil. Now I have a whole bunch of pencils pre-sharpened, so I don't need to waste time doing this. And with the H pencil, we're going to use a hatching stroke, and we're going to apply a tone over the eyelid. Okay, so with the hatching stroke, it's just basically the lines. And it doesn't matter whether you go this way or this way, it doesn't really matter, but just for the sake, I've developed a habit of always creating my strokes in the natural direction. The eye flows this way, so I'm just going to create the tone this way. And we don't, this is just what I call the blocking stage. We're applying our tone, and we're going to be doing a lot of blending, so you don't need to have this to be perfect. Okay, you just need to apply some graphite. And I'm using very little pressure. And I'm going to apply this with the entire eyelid, because we have a magic tool if we happen to make a mistake. It's called an eraser, so we can make some adjustments that way. Okay, so the H pencil with the hatching stroke over the eyelid, and then I'm going to switch now to a 2B. And 2B is softer than the H, and we're going to darken the crease a little bit. So just follow the outline this way. Again, with this one here, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't want to press very hard. The pencil does this naturally because it is a 2B pencil. The 2B pencil is what I call the kind of like the go-to pencil for everything. Make sure that's a little bit thicker. So I'm making it 2 pencil widths wide. So we had the line here, and I'm just going just on the outside a little bit and just making it 1 pencil line wider, just a little bit thicker. And we're going to be blending this as well. Take your time. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to go back to our H pencil. And I encourage you as well to create different variations of this in your sketchbook or an art journal with different pencils, just to see what you like the best and to develop your own style. So now we're going to add a tone, right, I would say probably about this half of the, sorry, this third of the eye right here on the top and the bottom. And we're going to use the same tone, but we're going to do cross hatching. So we're going to work this way, and then we're going to cut across. So I'm going to flip this over, and we're going to go right up to the eyebrow. So we're just going to lightly, and I'm using the natural force of gravity to hold the pencil. It's like there's zero pressure. I'm holding it far back on the shaft of the pencil, and the pencil's relatively not completely flat against the paper. I'm just holding up this way. This is how you, when you write, it's like this. It's almost flat. So I'm using a lot of graphite. So I'm just gonna kind of wrap about here. Okay. And then I already blocked in some of the lines here for the line drawing, and you're going to do the same thing there. And you may be saying, wait, but you said it was cross-hatching. Well, we are going to cross-hatch. I like to be frugal with my time, and I find that when I start doing hatching or a particular stroke, I get into the groove, and I want to take that groove and work the other areas of the design as well. Now I will do the cross-hatching. The cross-hatching, think of a tic-tac-toe board. You don't have to be perfect with, the shapes crossing that way, but I'm just going to go across. All you need to do is go across the line. And when that does is gently fills in all the pores in the paper. I can go the other way. Okay, and down here as well. Make sure you use very little pressure. Because if you use too much pressure, it'll be much more difficult to erase some of the lines. Okay, nothing fancy. I'm just going to go a little bit more. There we go. And you don't need to take notes while watching the video, because you can follow along with the written lesson. And at the same time, there will be some things that I do in the video that may not be in the lesson, because there's only so much paper you can write the lesson on, and you have to experiment, and we'll be doing that in the lesson as well. So we have that, and so we've got the tone now on the inner eye, the brow area, and underneath the eye you have a rough tone over the eyelid. Now this is going to help set the eye in place. So while we're here, let's draw the eyebrow. Okay, so with the H pencil as well. Now this one here, I'm holding the pencil further down on the shaft, and depends on how you want to hold the paper. Some people prefer pulling the strokes towards them. Some people prefer drawing away. It depends. I would suggest try both. So what you're going to do is you're going to touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift. The unfortunate thing is, this particular stroke needs to be done quickly. Because if you do it too slow, you're actually going to have where you touch, push, lift, and when you're not literally not lifting, it's like an airplane stroke. The pencil is touching, touching the paper, the plane is landing, then you lift off the paper, and when you're lifting off the paper, it creates the stroke as a tapered stroke. And when you're doing the stroke too slowly, you don't get that effect. Practice doing that as well. And the eyebrows are going to be just a little bit darker. Okay. And make sure every once in a while you take a look at the eye to make sure that the eyebrows are going in the right direction. And with that, for this exercise, you're going to work from the drawing. Okay, this drawing, but this drawing is the eye on the right side of the face. So we're doing the left eye now. Okay, so you're gonna have them. They're gonna be like this. When you're doing a portrait, the eyes need to be relatively the same. But for this particular exercise, we're just doing some practice. When we do the sketch of I show you the face mapping template that you can use to create a portrait using any reference material, then we'll talk about the features looking the same. Okay, so let's see. Yep, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to thicken this up a little bit more, so I'm bringing the stroke the other way. There we go. Okay, so now we have the eye blocked in, we have our tone, we have the base starting out with the eyebrow, and now in the next step I'm going to show you how to do some blending. What we're going to do now is do some blending. So now when we're doing blending, you think of, oh, you need perfect tones. Well, in a portrait, we don't need the perfect tones, because where we are, where we're going to be doing our blending is it's inside the eye, and the brow on the the general face sticks out a little bit more, and the eyelid crease are a little bit shadowed, so we can create a little bit of a rougher blend in here for the skin tone. So I've got my large blending stump, and I would say use the largest stump as possible, and you can use a small stump, but sometimes you've got your stump and it's used to a point at the end and it's perfect and you stick with that, and that's fine. If you find that with your stump that it gets really dirty, you get a little sanding block, and over a garbage can you can clean it by just going back and forth, and that just cleans the end. And sometimes you get a little bit of paper, just kind of pull that off and just gently do that, and never blow the dust. If you blow the dust, that's just going to get into the air. So for the blending, we're going to do this very, very slowly, very little pressure, because if you use too much pressure, you're actually going to burnish the graphite into the paper. You're going to fill up all the pores and you won't be able to do any erasing. Now, burnishing, think of waxing a car. So you've got the wax on the car, and then when you start buffing it, it gets really, really shiny. Well, that's the same thing here, is that if you too much pressure, you burnish the graphite into the paper and it gets shiny and you won't be able to do any correcting. And when I'm doing the actual blending with the stump, I try to use the same type of stroke in blending as I did to the actual sketch. So because I did cross hatching, I can do the blending the similar way, and I can just kind of go the opposite way here. I can do little circles, and I'm just going to bring the blend out a little bit further. I'm not pressing, I'm just very light pressure on this, because we're going to be using our eraser as well to do some lifting out. And actually, I didn't quite bring out enough graphite. I need to come out here. So I'm going to grab my H pencil and let's do some correction work. Well, I know that I need to bring out the tone right here. If you have enough graphite on your blending stump, you can just keep going. So you can just, instead of sketching it in, I can use the blending stump to do that work. If I had a fresh blending stump, then yes, I would have to come in and do some more hatching lines and then blend again. But if your stump is dirty, like what's here, this is dirty, I can keep blending any other areas that need to be blended, then come back. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm loading the blending stump with graphite, and then I can use the blending stump to do the rest of the work. I still have to blend the eyelid, so I know I'm going to be able to have some graphite left over with that. And also we're working now, this is the foundation. We will eventually build up the darkness to this. Okay? And now the eyelid. There we go. You'll also find that your blending is so much easier with the softer pencils. So with the 2B, which is what I did this crease in, the blending is so much easier because the 2B pencil is softer than the H pencil. See how much darker this is getting now? Okay. There we go. Pick up some graphite there. And if you see how they got a little bit of graphite up here, I'm not worried about that because we're going to be doing more blending up here to create the crease, and then the shadow will kind of come around. So we're going to be doing that. In this exercise, the technique that I'm showing you is not the only technique in the world. All artists have different techniques, and I encourage you to, if you really like to sketch out, you want to learn to sketch, sketch your family and stuff like that, I would practice on people that you don't have any type of emotional attachment to. I know from experience with my own students that people tend to have perfectionitis, and especially when they're sketching out or drawing their family members, they want it to be perfect, and then that gets in the way of learning the technique. Okay, there we go. Look at that. See, I didn't even have to do anything here with a pencil. But if you did have to do something with the pencil, you're just going to create the hatching or cross hatching to add a little bit of tone in there, and then you would blend it out. Okay, that takes care of that. And this part here is going to be a little bit darker. I'm going to add a little bit more graphite in here. I'm going to come back in with my H pencil just to build this up a little bit darker. Okay, so I'm just doing a little bit of hatching, and I'm going to come in with the blending stump. I'm going to use circle strokes. The circular stroke, I call it the scribble stroke, is what blends the graphite into the paper much faster. You could also just use a very hard pencil like a 5H to do your blending, but the technique I'm showing you is blending with and without a stump. Let's just bring this out a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so that's done. So let's work on the iris now. And let's go to a 2B pencil. And with that 2B pencil, now this is going to look a little bit scary. You have the eye, okay, the iris here. That needs to be a perfect circle. Mine is not a perfect circle because I'm going to show you how to do some adjustments, okay? Unless you have a compass or, let's say, a little spritzer bottle or nail polish bottle to draw a circle, your circles are going to be a little bit wonky, okay? So mine is a bit wonky, but I'm going to show you how to fix that. The easiest thing to do, though, if you're really serious about sketching people, is to pick up a little template like this, and you can... Now this one's a bit small. I'm drawing this eye for you quite large for video purposes, but I mean this would end up being an 18 by 24 formal drawing. But you can get templates and you just draw the circle. The same thing with the pupil, you would draw the circle. Okay. Now we're going to create kind of like a zombie eye here. We're going to take our 2B pencil, and you're going to start at the outside of the iris. Okay, this is the pupil, which will be solid black. This is the highlight. Okay, this is the iris. This is the whites of the eye, all in here. We have our lower lid here, upper lid here, the crease, and I don't know what the technical term is, but I'm going to call this a little doohickey in the corner of the eye. And we're going to start now from in the iris, the outside edge of the iris, and we're going to work towards the pupil. We're going to lift off our pencil right about here. Okay, like so. And you're going to create these lines here, and touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift. Okay, I can feel the pencil getting a little bit duller. I can go to another pencil that's sharpened, or sharpen this one, but I'm going to turn the pencil about a quarter turn, and then I have another bit of a sharper edge. I can do this, I can get away with this for this technique probably about one full turn of the pencil. Then I have to sharpen it. And you'll know when it's time for sharpening, when you feel the pencil. You'll actually feel the pencil getting dull, and you'll see the strokes won't be so tapered, they'll be fat on the end, because the actual lead is getting thicker, or flatter I should say. So you're going to do this. Now, what you would typically avoid covering the highlight, but I'm going to show you how to fix that. So we're just covering it by mistake. Oh no. And I'm going to work this way. And you want to leave some of these lines like this. Now we're going to be going back over this a few times. Right now we're just building the foundation. Okay. And if you look at your eye really close up, you'll see that there's all these little striations in the eye. And by doing this, we're actually going to be able to blend and keep the striations intact. And if you look at the reference, you can see that the lines in here, okay, that creates some depth to the eye, and it makes it look more realistic. Now, as I'm doing this, I'll do a little bit of talking. If you really want to get some good practice, if you have like a smartphone that has a camera where you can reverse the camera, like some smartphones you have the camera on the front and the back, take some selfies of your eye. Just make sure you look up at the camera part on the phone and not look directly into the face of the camera, because then your eye will be facing downwards. Or take a picture of your eye in a mirror. You can also, some magazines, and there's some great reference material on websites like Flickr and stuff like that. Morguefile.com is another one. You can get some really good royalty-free pictures that are under a Creative Commons license. Reference material is available, and practice, practice, practice. Okay, so we've got this done. Now this is where it's going to get kind of funny. We're going to go to our blending stump. And so this kind of looks funny, but when you're starting to blend, don't worry if it looks dirty. Okay, if it looks kind of rough looking. And oops, I went too far out. I'm going to correct that right now. I'm just going to grab my little vinyl eraser and just do it gently, lift that up. And I'm going to go around the highlight. I'm going to follow the direction here. This is going to be very, very dark underneath the eye. And basically you're creating the blend using the same stroke. And then we can go across as well. But for now, for learning, just do the blend in the same direction as the actual stroke that you made. Now you see I didn't quite get this right here. See how crooked it is? But I've got so much graphite in my blending stump that I can touch this up a little bit. But now as I'm doing my blending, I see a blending line here. For this particular case, it doesn't matter because we're going to be creating that at the end anyways. And this is why I like, when teaching just at the beginning, is you create your blending. You do your blending in the same direction as you created the actual stroke. Go back and forth. And this isn't quite enough graphite, but that's okay because we can adjust it a little bit later. And I'm going to go right into the pupil because we're going to be covering this with black anyway, so it doesn't matter. Make sure you don't press too hard. And I'm just going to touch up that outline there. Don't press hard. Use light pressure. Work inwards, and when you're working inwards, that's how you get rid of that blending line. Another great tool that you can use for blending is tissue paper. Practice though. For this particular exercise, use the blending stump, but you can practice with tissue paper as well, especially for large areas. And there's Royal Brush has a really nice set of chamois cloths, which is essential when you're doing some serious artwork. So that's something else you can pick up down the road. I have a lot of drawing tutorials on my YouTube channel and on my website, and the information will be at the end of the video, so you're free to check that out. There we go. So we were able to do the blending now, and we still have these striations in place, so we didn't lose anything. Okay, and I'm going to go off camera now, and I'm going to sharpen my pencils, and when we come back, we're going to I'm going to show you how to lift up the highlight in the eye. Now we're going to take our eraser. I'm going to show you two different techniques. And don't forget, when you need to clean off the dust on your paper just to tap it. One thing you want to invest in is invest in a nice soft brush like this. This is a royal brush. It's made of goat hair, and you can just brush the eraser particles. Under no circumstances do you blow. If you have like a clean makeup brush that you've never used before, you can use that as well. I'm going to take the kneaded eraser, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to form it. So think of this as like bread dough or something, or Play-Doh, and just going to form it into a little point. Okay? And also with the vinyl eraser, because this is just an exercise, I'm going to use the paper here. And to clean your eraser, you would just do this on basically scrap paper. And what I'm doing is I'm dragging the dirty part of the eraser down to the edges. I can just pick that off. And it also sharpens your eraser, the edges. Okay. So two ways to use our eraser for the highlights is, I covered the highlight here. Now when you put the eyes together, the sample in here, and you can think of that this could actually be the actual portrait, the highlights would be in different places. The highlights are basically like this highlight would be here, and then the other one would be here. Okay, this is an exercise on drawing individual eyes, and we will cover reflection on that in the actual face mapping exercise. So for the highlight, you can take the corner of the eraser and you can just gently lift that back out. The other thing that you can do, let's cover that back up again. The other thing you can do is take your kneaded eraser and form it to a nice point, and you can just bring it in like that. And for these types of highlights, I honestly prefer the kneaded eraser. And then once I'm done with it, I will fold it over and blend it, kind of form it back in there and bring it back to another point. You can form it to get a really, really tight point. These things, though, you have to keep folding them back in and using a fresh, clean part to do your erasing. These types are great for the highlights, say, in hair. I'm going to show you how to use this eraser to create highlights in hair in that segment. Now I want to erase some of the, no, not erase, I want to bring out some of the light in the eye. And I'm just going to show you, you can touch, and see how it's looking a little bit mottled, which is fine. Okay, and I'm just going to go around, which is basically the part of the iris that is the most rounded part. Okay, just like so. And see how much graphite it picked up? So, and you wouldn't do this over your drawing, but you take that, fold it over, and then bring your eraser to another point. And I'm going to grab, let's work with the 6B pencil. Now the 6B pencil is the softest pencil that we're using, and it's very black, but the softer the pencil, the shinier the finish. Okay, so be aware of that when you're doing your drawing. The softer the pencil, the shinier the finish, because it's less of the binding, the clay, and it's more graphite. So when we're drawing in the pupil, we're going to use scribble strokes. And the 6B pencil, like for this particular exercise, we don't have to worry about sharpening it. But usually you can only get a few strokes out of this, and then you have to sharpen it. And because we're just filling in, I'm not going to worry about it. And I can already see a lot of graphite dust building up, and that's because the pencil is very, very soft. And going around the edge, make sure that you're following the roundness of the pupil. And we are going to be blending this out closer to the end to make it a little bit larger. Okay, and let's go back in, and I'm just going to go slightly over the eye. This is the inside of the lower lid. Okay, this is the shadowed area right here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And I want to get rid of all that graphite dust in here. Now, don't worry about blending this right now. You can, but because we're doing our drawing with the tracing paper, going over the drawing, some graphite will actually lift off. So I'm not going to worry about blending right now. I'm just going to take my little brush. I can tap it over the garbage can. I have to turn around and garbage can's behind me. So just don't rub, especially when you're using a 6B pencil. Everything will smear. And we're going to go now to the 5H, which is one of the harder pencils that we're using. And we're going to hold the pencil almost flat to the paper. So I'm going to hold it way down on the shaft. And we're going to add some tone to the inside here, the whites of the eye, because it's not really white. It's sort of creamy. And because we're working black and white, we're going to make it a little bit of a light gray. And on the outside here, so I'm not even pressing on the pencil. I'm letting gravity do the work. And I'm just going to create a very light tone. You can see how light this pencil is. Very light. And touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift. And if you want to make it darker, you can go to, let's say, a 4H, or add another layer of graphite, but you will naturally be tempted to press harder, and I would suggest don't. Don't press harder because especially with these hard pencils, you will actually gouge the paper. So cross-hatching now, I get a natural darker tone. And we're going to work the inside of the eye. Now the inside of the eye, we're going to do the hatching stroke. We're going to curve it though. So we'll start out here. Now the little doohickey here in the corner, that goes about there, and it comes out about so. So we will work our hatching stroke, and then we can and just make it round. Like so. And we'll come to about here, about 3/4 of the way across this section. Now, if you didn't feel comfortable doing this round hatching, because it takes a lot of practice to do that, you can create your hatching strokes going across and then do the cross hatching. So then go in the opposite direction. But do the lift off, like touch, push, lift off right about here. That way you're not going to end up with a harsh line. Like so. Okay, and I need to make this just a little bit darker. Just going to add another layer, and each time you do the cross hatching in a different direction, it naturally gets darker because you're filling in all the pores of the paper. You can also, with this pencil, now this isn't covered in the written lesson, but you can also very, very lightly, and if you can actually down a bit further on the shaft, a circle stroke, a little scribble stroke. I love the scribble stroke because it's so flexible, but if you use too much pressure, it's very hard to correct. It softens the edges out so nicely. Okay, and even here I can do the same thing. I don't know how, now this lesson is very versatile. You could use this same lesson as well and practice with colored pencils and even watercolor pencils. Because they're all materials that you can use to draw with. Draw and sketch. Even the charcoal, same thing. There we are. That looks pretty good. You can see that it's starting to take shape, but it does take time. The eye is, I would say the eye is the hardest feature to master, but it's the most important, because if you don't get the eyes right, then the painting will look flat. It'll look soulless. But just with a few techniques and some patience, and once you've done a few, it'll start to become more naturalist, and you'll know exactly what needs to be done. And you don't have to actually do them in the order I'm telling you, but I do suggest that you do the eye first if you're doing a sketch of a full portrait. Work the eyes first. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's deepen that up a little bit more, and I'm just going to I'm going to go to the medium blending stump, and I want to show you something. So this blending stump, well worn, you can see it's almost flat on this end, whereas on this end it's pretty sharp. And this is nice when you're working on a larger area where you want it to be very, very soft. And I don't want to sharpen this. So when on the blending stumps, as I'm wearing them down, I will always try to keep one side quite sharp and the other side dull. So for this one here, I'll use the sharp part and, sorry, the dull part. Now, if you're using a fresh blending stump, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You just do the same thing as I'm going to show you. Just use really light pressure. And I'll show you on the dull side. And you're just going to use very light circle strokes to do the blending. I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit. Go around here like so. And then I'm going to use the sharp part to show you on this side. And you're going to do the same thing. The reason why you need to be careful on the pressure when you're doing this, because the eye, the white, because it's a smooth surface, you don't want to create texture per se. So like the eyebrows is as physical, there's hair coming out of the skin, that's physical texture. In the eye, there really isn't any texture, it's very shiny. So we want to try to keep it relatively smooth, but we want to have a little bit of, it's not so much for the texture, it's to create the shading underneath. And if you use a blending stump that's on the sharp end and use too much pressure, you're going to get lines that look like this. Oh, let me borrow some graphite. You're going to get that if you use too much pressure. Okay, we don't want that. So light pressure, circles. And don't be, if you're tempted to press hard, you're actually going to make the job much more difficult for you because you're going to have to erase some of the spots. Okay. I think I'm going to take the large graphite pencil, or the large blending stuff. I'm going to show you something. If you, let's see if I can get some scrap paper. If you grab some scrap paper, and I like doing this because I use this little book for some rough sketching. Take your 6B and and you can use this to sharpen your pencil as well, because you're just going to go around, turn your pencil, and this is another way to sharpen your pencil. There, my pencil's sharp. So now with this left over, I can load the blending stump to dirty it up. Because when you sharpen your blending stump on your sanding block, it becomes very clean. But let's say you need it to be dirty, just come in into a loaded area, and now it's ready to go. Okay. I'm going to put that aside because I know that I'm going to get my hand caught in it. So with the sharp point of the blending stump, and your blending stump should still be sharp because they're new. And I'm going to go around the iris very slowly because we want to make sure this stays round. We will be coming back later to refine that. And the lesson basically covers a general eye. Everybody's unique in their facial features. And you may notice that some eyes, if you look at some people, they may have a really dark ring around the eye. I have a dark ring around my eye. Some people have a more prominent ring, some people don't. So you would basically be using whatever you're sketching, you would do it that way. The other thing that you want to do is rotate your paper to make yourself more comfortable when you're doing your sketching. Okay. I think I want to bring a little bit more of the, let's see if I can do it with this one. It might be a bit dark. No, it's okay. Use some circle strokes. I want to put a little bit of a a shadow on the inside here underneath the lid. Just want to bring that over just a little bit, like so. And I also want to outline that eye a little bit. It's not quite dark enough. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with my H pencil. I always start with the lighter one. And I just, this line didn't quite come out as dark as I was hoping. Okay, the H pencil is a little bit hard. Yeah, it's a little bit hard. So I'm going to go up to the 2B now. You may not find it necessary. I found mine necessary because the outline, the ring around the eye, wasn't dark enough. If yours is, then you don't need to do this. One of the most frequent questions that I get from students when they're learning to draw and sketch, they'll say, well, especially for sketching, saying, well, because we're drawing everything black and white, we're working with a graphite pencil. My photograph is in color. I don't know how to draw that in black and white. The easiest thing is you convert your reference photograph into a black and white photograph. And you don't need fancy software to do that. Your printer can do it for you. Most printers now, the more modern printers, I would say even ones that are 5 years old or so, you can print your photograph in grayscale. And that will be a huge time saver. Just softening this part here. There we go. Much better. So put that aside. So there we go. Now I'm going to go back to the blending stump, and I'm just going to blend that out a little bit. In the other sketch that I did, let me reach that over. The ring is quite dark, and we can even further darken that at the end. There we go. Okay. Eyelashes. Okay, so the eyelashes are something that when we're young and we do our drawing, we create our eyelashes to be really, really long and really, really straight, when in fact they're not straight, they're curved. I'm going to use the 5H pencil for this, and we're going to create the eyelashes. On the top lid, the eyelashes go up and out. We're not doing the top, we're doing the bottom. The bottom, they work down and around to go this way. Okay, so we're going to start right about here, and in the lower lid you should have two light lines, and if you look at your own eye, you can see that there is the inner lower lid. The eyelashes actually grow inside this flap. They don't grow on the outside. So we're going to put our pencil inside, and you're going to create these little lashes. You're going to leave space in between, and they're not going to be all the same shape. Have some cross. Okay. And as the lashes go towards the outside of the eye, they get a little bit longer. For this exercise, they're a little bit longer. You're going to be using the photographs included with the kit to do this, but when you're working from an actual reference photograph, you'll be using that as your reference. So I already did one pass, and I'm going to, every few strokes, I'm going to come in and I'm going to cross some of the eyelashes. And just a few of them. Let's switch up to a 2B. So we're going from a 5H to a 2B, nice and sharp. And just going to draw a few. I'm going to put a few darker ones in. Make sure you don't cover all the empty spaces. We need some white space in there. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go back to my 5H. Now, you may not need to do this. I'm just going to make them just a few of them a little bit longer. There we go. Okay, so that's that. So pencils back, and I'm going to go to my 6B pencil now, and I'm going to, let's darken up this crease here. I'm going to darken that up here a bit more. This is all the details now we're working on. Okay. And the 6B blends really easy. Really, really easy. Okay. And let's I'm thinking I want to add do a little bit of dark strokes in here because it is very dark. We don't need to use a lot of this graphite because the pencil is dull now because I was able to do that and now it's dull. So now with at the flat part of the pencil, if I do these little circular strokes, I'll be able to do quite a bit of blending with the blending stump. Very little pressure though, and I don't think I'm going to add any more graphite other than that. And use the large blending stump. See how dark that is? There we go. We need this to be quite dark. And this has to be done before we do the lashes. And I'm probably not going to go any further than that. So we are going to lift some of this out as well. I'm going to bring this down a little bit further down here, and I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to lift this out. So this just show you how to, correcting. And when correcting, you can see that it's becoming a little bit more difficult to erase that 6B line that I put there previously because it's so much graphite. So I can push that out of the way and come back with the blending stump and then blend that in. And I'm just going to touch that up a little bit more. Okay, I got a little spot here. Touch, touch, touch. Fold that over. You got a clean part. There we go. If we go along the line, go along the crease, so the blending stump is going to pick up all that graphite we put on there. Now as we're going across, I'm going a little bit higher, and as I'm going higher, the blending is getting lighter and lighter, and it's going just above the crease. Don't press hard, very little pressure. You're going to repeat now. I'm going to go below the crease. I don't have much graphite left in my blending stump. So if I run out of graphite, go back with the 6B, go back in the crease. Blend it. You're basically borrowing the graphite and work it down. There we go. Well, I got a lot of graphite in here now, so let's take advantage of that, because we can always lift it out. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go a little bit higher than you need to. Very little pressure. That actually looks really good. Well, we're going to pretend I'm making a mistake, and then we'll lift it out. Okay. And I want to really make sure this is nice and dark right here. Okay. And I'm doing a lot of focusing on here because we can't, once the eyelashes go in, you really can't do any correction work. There you go. Still not quite dark enough. Let's go to a 2B. And I'm just going to add some little scribble strokes in here. And you can do this sketch 25 times and it'll look different 25 times. I want to make this really, really dark. And back with our blending stump. There we go. Much better. Much, much better. When you're working on the face mapping, we're going to take these elements and you're going to put them onto the face map, which is optional. You don't have to, but I included it anyways. You would be sketching both eyes at the same time. That way you're able to make them look the same. Okay, there we go. That is a lot better. So we've got that blending in there, and I'm going to take put my pencils back. I'm going to take the H pencil, and I want to define that lower lid. So now, where we created the eyelash, we're going to create the edge here, and I just want to define it because the actual eye is going to sit inside of that. You don't want to make it too dark. There we go. And let's define the doohickey in here. And let's just redefine this. You won't be able to see a lot of this right now because it is fairly dark. Okay. And does the eye look shaded enough? I think so. I think so. Let's add our upper eyelashes now. Sharp pencil. And we're going to come in. So these lashes now are going to go from this line right here up and around. Okay. So opposite to that. And I'm going to start here. And because these ones are long, so you're going to make some curved. Make sure you leave some spaces. You can always add more lashes if you need to, but it's much harder to take away. Okay, I'm going to turn that this way. Eyelashes grow in clumps. They look nice when they're in clumps. So this is not a mascara commercial either, so the eyelashes will have their own little tricks and personality, and every lash will not be lifted and separated. unless that would be what your reference photograph looked like if you're sketching a person. I want to bring some of those lashes a little bit higher than the crease, so I'm going to widen out the spaces a little bit. Now down here, you're going to need to use a little bit of pressure because the area is so dark. The lashes down here are a little bit shorter, and as you come up to this crease, they get really long. And right here is where they're going to be the longest. Right now they look really, really long. That's because we haven't defined this. Once we define the line here and the shading and everything, it's all going to make sense. Okay, that's pretty good. And you know what, while we're here, let's work on the eyebrow. Now my pencil is a little bit dull, so I'm going to switch to another 2B. And I'm going to deepen these eyebrows. So in the general eye, I like to say the eyebrows go right about to here. Okay, so they kind of, because the bridge of the nose is here. So again, it depends on the reference material that you're using. And again, some people have thick eyebrows and they're all uniquely shaped. And the eyebrows as well, in certain exercises, sketching exercises, the eyebrows, the shape defines an emotion that the person is feeling. Like the eyebrows are really, really high and the eye is drawn high and the person could look surprised. Touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift. And you see I'm moving around. I'm overlapping with the hairs because that's how they grow. Constantly turning, checking, 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 checking. And the eyebrows should be darker than this tone. So I'm doing one pass and then I'll come back and do another pass. I'm rotating my pencil to make sure it's always sharp. Don't press too hard, otherwise you're going to gouge the paper. And then they feather out here. And I am going to go the opposite way now. Just going to bring, when I go the opposite way, the stroke this way is going to be a little bit lighter. Just want to soften that a little bit. Now I can press a little bit harder on some of the strokes, which will darken them. And I want to make this a little bit thicker here. Again, as a reminder, when you're doing the face mapping exercise, where you're basically taking everything you've drawn and you're going to draw it again on an actual face layout that I've done for you, you're going to do the eyes at the same time, because I'm looking at this and this eye isn't quite the same shape. The eyebrows aren't quite the same shape as this eye. Okay, not quite. Probably can't see there, but they're not quite the same shape. Okay, so you're going to do them at the same time. There we go. And we can also refine at any time. Here we are. That's looking pretty good. And let's work on the shadowing now under the eye here. And that's when things are going to start to make sense. So we're going to use, we already have the 2B, so I might as well use that. We're going to deepen that dark shadow underneath the lid with this pencil. We're going to blend it with the stump. And then if it's still not dark enough, you can use now a much softer pencil. So you can go to, say, to a 6B and you can make it even darker. And when we're doing this, we're going to be going round and round. Okay, so we're going to start here. And so I'm using a hatching stroke. Okay, and I'm going to curve the stroke You want to make sure you're not pressing hard on this because you don't want to gouge the paper. Because at this point now, if you ruin your drawing, all that work you've done will be lost. We're going to bring the shadow down to about here. Now you could do this just with a pencil by following this exercise here. I want you to try doing this with the blending stump as well. You can always deepen the shadows and blend more if necessary. But let's see where we are just with that. So take your blending stump and come in. You're going to start at the top. We're going to work over that line. Okay, now we're going to bring it down a little bit. So we're going this way. We're going to bring it down a little bit. And we are definitely going to have to darken this a little bit more. So the 2B just wasn't enough. Okay, so let's go to a 6B. I'm going to do the same thing over again. Now you can start seeing it really being defined. And now we're going to be, so where the eyelashes actually started, we're going to go over that line, which is then going to bring the eyelash into the skin and not just sitting on top of it. Oh, this is looking really good. There we go. I'm just going to get that drawing out of the way. Yeah, that's looking really good. I'm going to turn that around here and just going to, and sometimes when I'm really defining a sharp edge, I like the pencil to be at that edge, which is why I turned my paper. Bring this down a little bit more. The 6B pencil is very dull now, which makes it perfect for doing this. I'm not going to have any gouges or hard lines that are going to be hard to correct. Yeah, that looks really good. I'm going to take the 6B. Let me just pop in just a few dark lashes there. The tone was a little bit light there. And looking at that now, and I believe I want to bring this down a little bit more. Think of like a moon. Very, very light. Very, very light. Now with the blending stump, this is going to load the blending stump really, really well. At this point, I don't believe you're going to need to add any more graphite to the stump because this should cover everything. Yeah, and it is. That looks good. Round stroke there. Rotate your paper. And if you rotate your paper, make sure you rotate your reference material as well. That way you're actually looking at it spot on. There we go. That looks really good. Take your time, especially at this point now. You've done so much work. I'm thinking. I'm going to take the blending stump. I'm just going to soften this up a little bit more. I used a little bit too much pressure. I'm going to take that. You may not need to do that. I'm just basically going over now, and I'm looking and just refining, deepening the inner corner here because the nose is here. Okay, and that's pretty good. All right. Now we're at the point now where everything now is basically accents. So if we look at the eye now, I mean, it's pretty good the way it is. I mean, I really like what we've done so far. But if we wanted to push it just a little bit further, let's say we want to bring out some of the light in between the eyes. Now, if you by chance happen to add in way too many lashes, let's say this was really, really dark, you could come in with the eraser and you could lift out some light. Now, let me go to the other eye that I did. See, this one was much darker. I could take that eraser and go in between and just touch in to bring out some of that light. In this eye, though, the eyelid was done much lighter. So if we think of, in this one here, she could have, let's say she's got some dark eyeshadow on, and then the light pieces here is where light is reflecting on her eye. And this one here, let's say she could be natural or not have any eyeshadow on. But let's say if you wanted to deepen up, let's say that's too much light and you want to deepen it up a bit, what do? Start with the lightest pencil, and I know a 5H is way too light, so I'm going to use a 2H, and I can come in now, and I can just fill in some of the spots here, and I'm not going to lose my lashes. If you work with a pencil that's too dark, you're going to lose the lashes. And I'm just putting a little bit in here. If it's not enough, go to something a bit softer. So I'm going to go to an H. Oh, that's perfect. And you would do that. Now, I like what I've got here. I don't want to darken it up anymore, but I do want to bring out a little bit of light here, right in here. So I'm going to bring this to a nice fine point. Actually, I brought it to a point and I flattened it. Okay, you're not going to get much use out of this one though. Okay, now I'm not getting any more because now the eraser's dirty. Fold it over and then form it into a point and flatten. There we go. Perfect. And while we're here, I can take the eraser and I can just do a little bit of touching right in this corner part here where I just want to make this a little bit brighter. It's just where the gradation is. Okay. I want to deepen that crease a little bit more. I'm going to take a 2B, and I can go right across. Very lightly though, right over the eyelashes, as long as the graphite is going to be still a little bit lighter than the lashes. Okay. And let's just define that lower lid a little bit better. Still keeping things nice and soft. And if the reference material you're looking at, let's say you're working from a magazine, you know some models they use eyeliner on the inside lid. You would basically do the same. What I'm doing here, you would just draw that in that way. Okay, and let's see, what else have we got here? I think it's time that we start darkening, doing the finishing stages on the eye to really darken it. So these are basically just the last accents, and in that I'm going to work with the 6B, and I want to deepen this a little bit more. And although I'm doing this exercise is to show you, what you're going to do is you're going to look at your sketch and decide what needs refining. And for this stage, for this what I'm doing here, I don't care if the 6B is sharp or dull. Okay. The eye is very dark right here. Very, very dark. This is where things really start to come together. So, got that. That can always come back in and bring that highlight back in there. So I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to refine that outer edge. Keep turning, keep turning, keep turning, keep turning. Don't use any firm pressure with this. Okay. And I'm going to take my blending stump and watch how dark this gets. It gets so dark. And the number of layers that you would do with this would be determined by the color of the eye. So if the eye was hazel, you wouldn't need to make this as dark. But if the eye is brown, then yes, you would have to do this extra layer. So when you're practicing using, from a magazine or from a family member, print the photograph in grayscale or black and white, and then it'll show you. The photograph will tell you or guide you. There we go. And I'm going to let's do this. If we take this now and go the opposite, 2B pencil, there, we're going to do this. We're also going to be widening the eye a little bit, or the pupil I should say. And take our blending stump. And this is why I wasn't worried about blending the pupil out, because I'm going over it now anyways. Here we go. Pouring some graphite there, very dark in that spot. And I'm going to come in now with the vinyl eraser. I'm just going to touch in that highlight to make sure I don't lose it. I'm going to come in, go back in with the 6B. And I want to make this just a little bit, no, I lied, the 2B. And I can do the same exercise, but this time using a little bit of pressure. I use a little bit too much pressure there. And what I'm doing now is I'm darkening, but I'm adding some more texture or some more effects of texture inside the eye. And then with this step though, I may not want to blend it with the blending stump because I don't want to lose these lines that I'm putting in. And oops, lost that there. Always make sure your tracing paper is underneath. There we go. Alrighty. Pretty good. Now once we come in here and then take that kneaded eraser, I'm just going to touch again right around here. See how it brings that right out? You can also flatten the eraser and you can bring a few little lines like so. Anytime I use the eraser for this type of step, I will always say come back in with the blending stump or with the pencil and touch it up. But that looks pretty good. Still not light enough though. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now, the other thing too is if the eye doesn't look light enough with the highlight, then you can darken the outside edge. Come back in with the 2B, and I'm just going to use firmer pressure. So on a scale of 1 to 5, where the where the pencil was just being manipulated by gravity would be, let's say, a 1, and I would be using probably about a 4 right now. And if you're unsure about the amount of pressure you should be using, always create some practice strokes on some paper. Preferably if the paper is the same paper that you're doing your sketch on, just take an extra sheet and put it aside. There we go. What else could we do here? So now it's all about refining. Sometimes you may need it, sometimes you may not. It will all depend on what your sketch looks like. And I think for me, I'm going to take my 6B pencil and I'm just going to, now this is the 6B pencil that I was using that's dull. And I'm just adding in just a few extra pieces in here, and I'm going to just shade this a little bit more. Can't do too much because we've already got our eyelashes in there. Just going to deepen this a little bit, and I'm going to take the blending stump and now I'm just going to go around, and what I'm doing now is I'm going to refine this. And at the same time, I'm going to be lifting up some graphite. And I'm going to come in here, see that line here, I'm just going to go over it. In the reference material that I'm working from, I actually drew a ring around the eye because the eye had a really deep ring, almost like a self-portrait. This one here, I'm actually using the blending stump to do that work. And I'm going a little bit faster than I should. Take your time when doing that. Let's take our 6B, come back in, firm pressure. Okay, and now I'm just going to go a little bit past the eye, because the iris, the pupil, although it is solid black, because the eye is round, and I want it to be a little bit softer, not too soft around the edge, but softer. Our blending stump, and this you can, if you're sure about the shape, use firm pressure, and you're going to burnish that right into the paper because we are not going to be using the eraser on this whatsoever. You may not be able to see this, but I can actually see when I did my actual sketch with the 5H, I can see the gouge in the paper. I don't think you can see that right there. And then when the camera lights are flat, hitting the paper on with my view, it's really noticeable. Which is why when you're doing your initial sketch, use very light pressure. I can darken this here. There we go. Now I'll just take the same blending stump and I'll just not blend the whole thing out, but just bring some lines in there. Come back in with that highlight. Looks pretty good. And oh, and I'm going to show you, you can bring the highlight as well just with the vinyl eraser. Like so. Okay. It's not as soft as with a kneadable eraser, but you can use it as well. And then I will take the clean, not a clean stump, but a stump that doesn't have a lot of graphite. And I'm just going to touch up a few little spots here. Okay. And now if pretending that we're working from a photograph with the ring is really, really dark, I can take a 2B pencil and draw the ring in there. In the other drawing, the ring is very prominent. There we are. Darken that a little bit more. And soften that out. Oh, this is pretty good. Now just to show you another technique. So let's pretend we took out way too much of the eye, okay? We were talking with our friend and oh no, I wasn't paying attention. So the first thing I would do is when you realize, oh, I took too much out, come back in with a blending stump, preferably a clean part. And so let's just take our little one, and let's just clean that. So you're going to go over and you're just going to put a little bit of a tone back in there so it's not the white of the paper. Okay. Then take, let's say, the 5H. So take the lightest pencil and you're just going to draw lines. Just draw lines right over. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, this fixes everything. Just don't use too much pressure. Because at this point, because of the amount of graphite you have on here, if you use too much pressure, you're going to cut out, gouge into the graphite that's on the paper. See? Now, if it's not enough, go to the next pencil. So let's just take a 2H, and you can add a few of these. And if that's not enough, then you would go to basically a softer pencil so you can go down the range. There we go. And I'm just going to soften that edge of that highlight a little bit more. Okay. I think we're pretty well done. Now with this here, you practice doing different ones. Like the one eye that I showed is much darker than this one, and we'll take a zoom out and I can show you both at the same time. So now you can see they're two totally different looking eyes because we didn't do them at the same time. So if you were doing this as an actual portrait, you will be working on the eyes at the same time. You can see that the values are quite different. It would take some work, but I could match them up. I would basically match this to look like this. You could match it up with a little bit of work. This just needs to be a little bit darker in here. And the eyelid is definitely much darker, so I could come in here and I can touch that up in here. Like I said, it's much more work doing them completely independent. So if you were creating the actual portrait, if you did only one eye to completion, then you went to do the other eye, they're going to be different. But if you're working on the foundation, so you're doing your block in, your tone, your shading, your details, your accents, both at the same time, then your eye will naturally be the same. Okay? So this one here has a little bit more detail than this one. This one's much smoother. But yeah, this eye here is much darker. You can see how dark it is here. And this one is not as dark. Two completely different eyes. If I want to take my 6B pencil, and that's not a 6B, that's a 2H. 6B. See, I can make some adjustments here, but you can see how much work it is doing them individually. So make sure when you get to doing the face mapping exercise at the end of the video, to do them at the same time. But there we go. So we're all set. Just going to blend that out a little bit. We're all set. So now you know how to sketch the eye. And remember, when you're working later on down the road to practice some more, you're going to work, if you have color photographs or pictures of your family members or from magazines and that, take a photocopy in black and white or print out your photos in black and white. It'll make the biggest difference in the world. So now I'm going to clear off my table and we're going to move on to the next feature, which is sketching the mouth. So for this exercise, we're going to be sketching the mouth. And so this is the piece that I'm going to be referring to. And although, I just want to show you something else. As I was preparing for this workshop, I did a lot of sketches, and this is the one and that we're basically going to work on from here. These sketches, these ones here, were only 5 and 10 minute sketches, like really fast renderings. And so as you work and practice, you'll find that doing these will really help you refine your skills. So although the mouth that's in here and the mouth that's here and the mouth that we're going to do here are going to look completely different, and that's going to be natural because you can do this exercise 25 times and you'll have 25 different versions because things are always done differently. Use a little bit more pressure. The lighting could be different, so you can interpret the values differently. So just go with the flow and enjoy the process. So I did my outline. Now I did this one a little bit darker than it should be for video purposes. And with the line drawing, I created this line drawing a little bit lopsided here because I want to show you how you can change the shape of the mouth. So we have our shape here, and we're going to work with this, and then I'm going to show you when we get down to the refining stages, actually putting a little bit of a smile by just using a little bit of tone. We start off with our 5H pencil, and whether you start here and work down, here and work up, or here and work down and here work up, really doesn't matter. Essentially what we're doing is using curved hatching strokes on the top of the upper lip, bottom of the upper lip, the top of the lower lip, and the bottom of the lower lip. And we're all working towards the center. And the upper lip's going to have a little bit of a light area here, and the bottom lip is going to have a little bit of a light area here. And so this is basically what you're going to be doing. Now when you're working, practicing, trying different pencils, do them in the sketchbook, and try combinations of different pencils. So right now with this, I'm starting off right away with a 5H to put in the tone, which is what I usually do. I put in a light tone first. See what happens if you use a 2B. but do everything in a sketchbook and document what you're doing. That way you'll see what works, what doesn't, what made you feel good. So let's say you created a sketch using a 2B pencil and you absolutely loved it. Make a note of that, because that way you're starting to develop your own style and work with what makes you feel good. You'll find that you'll have a favorite hardness of pencil, a favorite shape of your eraser, your stump just out of the right dullness or sharpness, and work with that. Oh. And always make sure you've got the tracing paper underneath. I keep forgetting that. And as well, try doing the lips with blending with a stump, and some just use a pencil to create everything, all the tone. You can also do some blending with a 5H pencil. Once you've done your sketch, you just go over everything. Now, see when I was doing the explanation of starting here, I've got these little black marks here now. I have to get rid of that. That's gonna bug me. If you see something that needs to be fixed, try to fix it right away so it doesn't sit there and stare at you every time you do something. The mouth is fairly easy to do, and just depends on the shape, but I'm starting out quite light. And we will use the blending stump. I will create this mouth a little bit differently than the one in the written lesson, just to show you more techniques. And the mouth is another thing that's really, really important to learn. I think the eyes and the mouth are probably, I would think they're probably the most important features, well, to me anyways, because the mouth and the eyes is what creates the emotion in a person. Although the nose, I mean, you can scrunch the nose to put a little bit of an effect, but I find that you can do a lot with the eyes and the mouth. But putting the whole thing together, it's proportions. The mapping of these features onto the face, that's important. And if you take a look at your lips, if you take a selfie or look in the mirror, you'll find that your lips have all these little peaks and valleys. And although you're not going to draw every single little peak and valley, what you're doing is creating the impression. Now with the lip here, the lips are all different shapes. So this one here, I created this one a little bit more of a U shape, wide and then up. Wide and then up. And the same down here, wide. And then this is now where you can do some refining. Just going to go up a little bit more above that line and down. Because what we're going to do is when we come in to start doing some shading in between, we put a little bit of dark here, it looks like a slight part in the lips. And this is something you're going to need to know how to do if as you progress you really want to focus on creating portraits of people. Okay, so we've got some basic shapes in there. So let's take our stump, start at the middle, and you're going to work it down. Now preferably a dirty blending stump is best for this. Am I using the dirty side? No, let's try this side. There we go. Always start right in the middle of the mouth and work it down. Now you see here how I have some dark parts and some light parts. That's fine. Because in the mouth, because there's so much texture in there, that the little peaks and hills and valleys and all that stuff will reflect the light differently. And I'm creating the blending in the same direction. Also going to make these lips a little bit lighter than the one in the written lesson, just again to show you something different. Techniques are relatively the same though. And the amount of graphite that you use when creating your sketch will be determined on skin color as well. And you don't have to be intimidated by thinking you're going to be sketching from photographs of people with different skin colors, because you're going to be converting the photograph to a grayscale or black and white using your printer. And then you use those values, the lightness and darkness of the graphite, you use the values in the photograph to help you choose how light or dark you need to make your sketch. But if you're, let's say if you're sketching dark skin, the lips will naturally be darker, so you'll be using more graphite. And if you're going to be sketching somebody who's very fair, the lips will be much lighter, or even a baby. I've seen some photographs of babies where you can barely tell where the lips start because they're so pale. There we go. I'm just going to use a blending stump now just to refine that edge. And you can actually use this just the way it is right now. But we're going to go a little bit further. Your blending stump is actually going to be your friend. I'm just going to blend a little bit further down, like so, 'cause it creates a little bit more of a part. And the light area is where most of the light's the fullest part of the lips. There we go. Okay, so now we've set the tone and we're ready to do some shading and some highlighting. And when we're doing this part here, you have to kind of take a look at the whole thing. And lighting is very important. So when you're creating, when you're doing your drawing, try to draw in the same spot. If you have natural light, try to draw in the same spot. Otherwise, what your sketch will look like in the daylight versus in the evening with artificial light, it will look a little bit different. Okay, now let's set the lips down on something. So we're going to basically add some graphite so the lips don't look like they're floating on air. And the best way to do that is just, I'm using a 5H pencil, and I'm just going to use horizontal strokes very carefully, very lightly. Now this is just a facial feature exercise. If you were to do an actual portrait of this, you may have the skin tone already put in. Okay. This just helps set the drawing or your sketch into something. If you were doing this with charcoal, you could probably have this already done. And charcoal is a really nice medium when you're creating rough renderings of lips. It's a really, really good medium to work with. I'm just going to make the shadow a little bit darker under here and on the side here. And I'm just going to bring a little bit more of the shadow here. And cross hatch that. We're going to be erasing some of this in here as well. Again, this is not a formal portrait. We're practicing facial features. So make sure you try different things. And keep practicing with multiple versions. Practice with different pencils, different, whether you use the kneaded eraser or vinyl eraser, different hardnesses of the pencil, whether you use a blending stump or not, just to practice and get that, just get that in there and document what works for you and what doesn't work. Okay, so now we have basically a rough skin tone put in there. And what we're going to do now is this little doohickey under here. This is what's underneath the nose, and it looks different for everybody, but generally it's the shape of a U, or a wide square U. And I'm just going to get that in there. It's sort of the skin in between the, well, it's not sort of the skin, it's the skin in between the mouth and the nose. Again, using the 5H. And I thought I would just include this anyways, so you can get some practice with it. So you see I had to make that much darker. This will all be shadowed anyways because the nose is right here. Using the pencil on its flat, on the flat side. If you're actually sketching out skin tone, you would be using much more careful strokes. I'm going to take the kneadable eraser. I'm just going to reshape this here. There we go. Okay. And don't forget, rotate your paper if you want to get into some tight spots, something that's a little bit finer. Okay. And let's darken some stuff up now. I'm going to move to a 2B pencil. So that's what's my 5H. 2B, always sharp. Sharp, 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 sharp. And now we're going to work the top part. And I'm going to work much slower now. Follow the outline of that lip. We're basically, what we did here, we're doing it all over again now. Bring that around. You notice I'm not going as far this time because the blending stump will take a lot of the graphite. And the shadows, the amount of graphite you put down for shadows will also will show where the light's coming from. So if I, like in this original sketch that I did, here, it's much darker here, which means the light is on this side. Whereas here, same thing, it's a little bit darker here, so the light is coming from here. Here, the light's more in the front. What else have I got here? For the nose, like this one here, the light's on this side, and then this one, it's turned. So that'll help determine where the light source is coming from. So we'll make this one darker. And also, you know, you've got the light source to think about, and there's also the actual physical parts of the lips. Let's say if you have a lip that's, because everybody's unique, so you may have one particular lip that's got maybe a little bit more poofy on one side or a little bit more sunken in. Your model or your reference photograph will tell you what to do. When I say tell you what to do, is that you're going to look at what your reference material, whether you're working from a live model, which is always fun, but don't start sketching from a family member if at all possible, because as covered before, your perfectionitis syndrome will kick in, and there's nothing more frustrating is that when you're spending so much time creating a sketch which you're very happy with, and the person that you're sketching says that doesn't look anything like me. That's why you never work from a family member when you're learning. A subject that's really fun to sketch, but very hard to do live, are children, because they won't sit still. Now, I'm lucky where I am that there's a studio in downtown Hamilton where you can pay $10, and they have a live model there. You pay $10 and you can sit and sketch, paint, do whatever you want, whatever medium, work from a live model for 2 hours, which is a really, really good deal. But life isn't perfect, and not all of us have access to live models, so this is where photographs come into play. And there's some really good websites out there that have copyright-free images to work from with Creative Commons licenses. Like say Morgfile, Flickr, stuff like that. Take photographs out of magazines. You're just doing practice sketching, so that's great. Another amazing thing to do is work from the old masters. That's how we learn in art school, is you copy the work of the old masters. You're not selling the work, but you're copying their work to learn their techniques. And you learn a lot about the artist as well. Another model that's a great model to use for photographs, which is free, is take self-portraits of yourself. Grab your camera and take a whole bunch of selfies. I'm going to make this side a little bit darker. Okay, and now I'm going to take my the blending stump. I'm going to switch the blending stump now. I'm going to go to the middle size because it's much smaller, and we'll do that. There we go. And so if you use your own self for your portraits, for practice portraits, that's fine. But again, remember to avoid perfectionitis. And never compare your skills to another artist, because everybody's different. There you go. I like in some of my sketchbooks I've done a few sketches of Angelina Jolie, and she's a really wonderful person to sketch, because of her lips are so full, and there's some photographs where she's done her makeup in cat eye eyeliner, and very different. Johnny Depp's another one, pink. They're really nice to sketch from. I did a abstract piece of John Wayne in this was a few years ago, and he's another one that's really fun to create artwork from. Okay, so you see now how that's really highlighted. It still looks really rough right now, but we're building up that stage. And in the actual the written lesson, this is much darker already, so I'm just showing you a different take on it. And you can blend across and bring that down, creating more of a gray tone. So this is how you would replicate lips that are very fair. And lips that would be darker, you would just be using more graphite. Okay? See? I'm working across now just to blend that out a lot more, using barely any pressure. Barely any pressure. So I'm going to really blend this one out to almost get rid of the highlight. I'm going to show you how to put a highlight in. But at this point now, if you're following the order that the lessons were done, you'll already know how we can put light back into our sketch. Right? You know how, right? We take our trusty Add Light tool. Now these kneadable erasers are quite stiff, and you just keep massaging them. But sometimes, like I know myself, that I have trouble, getting older and stuff like that. So just do the best you can, but you could always use the vinyl eraser. Now with this, you can just touch. And that'll bring the light back. With the vinyl eraser, I like using the corner and do the same thing. I can get some real nice detail with that. And always come back in. Now this is where you can use the 5H pencil. Now this is just techniques that I'm showing you. You can come back in with the 5H and put the tone back if you didn't want to use the blending stump. The good thing about using the 5H to do this type of thing after erasing out is that you're putting lines back in there. So I can come back in here now with some lines here. And depending on how dark the lips are, you could do this with a 2H, an H pencil, or even a 2B. Depends on how dark the lips are. Okay. And let's see. I'm going to deepen up those lines a little bit. I'm going to go to a 2B pencil. So the lips I'm drawing are much lighter than the ones in the written lesson, but I still need to put a little bit of shadow in there. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to deepen this a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to turn that around. And you have to make sure you blend everything in. So now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow the line. Now I'm going to just come up a bit. This is now where we're going to make the mouth look like it's smiling. Okay, we just created the little archway going upwards. And now the 2B pencil I'm working with is fairly dull, so I'm going to use that to my advantage. And instead of using the blending stump, I could use the pencil to do some shading. Now this part here is not covered in the written lesson, but it's just another technique that's easier to show in a video than to explain with written instructions. You have to sometimes just see it being done. So this 2B pencil is duller. Okay. And let's just bring this little arch up just a little bit more. And I'm just going to come down here. And I'm just reshaping the lips a little bit. Now, this part here, I could actually erase this or use it to my advantage. I'm going to do that. I'm going to use the same 2B pencil and I'm just going to shade that out. There we go. See, now we've created a little bit of a ground there, and then you can come in now with your blending stump, and you can come in and just soften that edge. And the lips come in all different shapes and sizes, so you're going to look at the reference material you're working from, or whether you're working from a live model. And sometimes the mouth can be shaped one way on one side. They're not always perfectly symmetrical. So keep that in mind. Because sometimes your brain will say, oh, this one's not quite right. You have to fix it. Well, always look at your model or your reference material. Okay. So now we have a a mouth that has, let's say, we could say lighter lips with lip liner. And we can come in and say, well, if we want to darken it just a little bit more, we can come in and with the 2B, and we don't even necessarily have to use the blending stump for this. We can just use the pencil. And make your strokes short for a really pronounced shadow, or a little bit longer for a much much smaller highlight. So here it's going to be much shorter because the lips are going to be really light here, but at the same time we can make, there's the darkness here for shadow, and there's also little lines like this which are the actual markings in the lips, and all lips have them. I call them mouth wrinkles, with the types of shapes that you can do with your mouth, talking and making funny faces and stuff like that. It's a wonder the mouth isn't more wrinkled. Okay. See? Now the highlight here is a little bit big, so I'm going to darken that a little bit more in here, but I'm just going to make these strokes a little bit longer. I only want this this widest part to be highlighted. Oh, I like that. Made a nice dark patch there. I really like that. We'll work with that. So I'm not going to use the blending stump as much now. I'm pretty well actually not going to use a blending stump anymore. This is where you would practice though. Try it and see. I'm going to switch up to a sharper 2B pencil. And create our lines there. And rotate your paper so you're comfortable. Right now I'm finding it easier to pull the strokes towards me, depending on what I'm working on. Just make sure that when you're doing your sketch, you're rotating your drawing paper and you're rotating your reference material at the same time. I'm just going to lightly cross hatch over the center and here as well. Make this a little bit deeper. I'm going to make this a little bit deeper as well. Cross hatching. There we are. And as you're creating your sketch, you'll find, oh, wait a minute, I can use this stroke to do this, and I can use this stroke to do this. And you're going to do what works for you. Just going to deepen that a little bit more. And personally, if I was doing this for myself, I would stop right now because I really like the tones that I have in here. I really like the tone, but there's just a couple more things I want to show you how to do. Okay, I love what I have there. So where in the actual written lesson drawing I used a blending stump, and you can see this has a lot more tone in it. With the 5H pencil, this is how you would blend now using the 5H. Is did all my work here with the 2B. Take your 5H now, and you're going to go over everything. And the 5H now is going to help push some of that 2B graphite into the paper, and at the same time it's also going to add more texture because the lips are very textured. If we were to just use a blending stump, you may lose a lot of this texture and you end up with just a gray tone. But the 5H pencil, as long as you don't press too hard, you can still lift up some highlights. And you may find you prefer the 4H or the 3H. There we go. Oh, I really like that. I'm going to bring these up a little bit more. And the only thing left after this to show you is we lift out the highlights. Remember not to press too hard. So I'm putting a lot of graphite here because this is where I want to do the lifting of the highlight. So don't put this much graphite unless you want to purposely practice this. I'm going to switch to a 2H now. A little bit more in there. So you see, as you add more and more graphite, the lips become darker and darker and darker. Alrighty, so that's I'm going to use circle strokes. I'm going to darken this a lot more. Okay, so you would use your kneadable eraser and you could just touch up See how easy that is? Just make sure you rotate your eraser and form it so you have a clean part. And then now you could come back in with a blending stump if you wanted to, but it would just make more of a gray tone. And I'm going to come in now with my 5H pencil and basically add a few more lines so I don't lose that texture, but it is still fairly light. There we go. So see, the mouth is fairly simple to do. You just basically you're working with these shades and the different highlights, but your best friend will definitely be the kneadable eraser. And I'm just going to blend this out a little bit more for the skin tone. I'm just going to go over that now because it's actually not supposed to be white, it's just very light. There we go. And the mouth now is finished. So just by changing the direction of these lips here, now we end up with lips that have a little bit of a smile on them. You can even bring it up a little bit more for something more heighten this part up. And they'll really look like they're smiling. And then in the actual, when you do the actual drawing, there'll be a little bit of a shadow in here, just where the chin is. There's a little shadow right in here. So now if I use the blending stump, just go over everything, you can see that now the highlights that were white are now becoming gray. And you lose that pop of highlight, so come back in with your kneadable eraser. And add some of those highlights back in there. And you're all set. So practice this using different pencils, take some selfie portraits and create, you know, basically you're only having to work with a general shape and all the accents you put in there. We're using the different pencils and blending tools to create the texture. All right, so practice this in your sketchbook. And now we're going to move on to the last facial feature, which is drawing hair. So in the last feature that we're going to be sketching, it's going to be hair. Now for this particular exercise, I am showing you technique, not hair on a head. Because the technique is the same for really any shape of hair. The only real difference is for the color of hair. So for the lighter hair, you would probably stop about halfway through. And I'll tell you, okay, this is where you would stop now if you're drawing lighter hair. And this is much darker hair. And this is one of those things where you really only need an outline to work from. But to show you the most techniques possible, what I did is I measured off a square in my paper, so I don't go outside that, just to help contain myself. And what I want to do, and now this is all freestyle, so you'd be looking at your actual reference material for what you want to work with. And I would suggest that you practice doing this way, and then with the next lessons where I'm going to provide you with two templates. One is a faceless woman's head, and the other one is a facial map. And you can use that to practice to do your hair. So we're going to use a 2H pencil, and I'm going to start off just by getting some basic shapes in there. And the whole stroke, the stroke that you're going to use for everything is touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift. And where you're touching, pushing, and then lifting off, the stroke here, as you lift off your pencil, is going to be tapered. So the stroke will, I'm going to exaggerate the stroke here, looks like that. Okay, so your touch, push, and then lift. Think of like an airplane. So we're just going to get some shapes here. And in the actual drawing, this was a bit more of wavy hair, so we'll do this one with more flowing hair. So we'll just do flowing hair. So that's about the shape we're going to work with, just flowing hair like so. Okay, and to basically get this started, we're going to just work straight with the 2H pencil so we can keep going. And all I'm going to do, and what I'll do is because we did this one as really, really dark hair, I'm going to work this one here to be a little bit more lighter hair. Okay, so you could start this part here with the darker lines if you wanted to. Okay, but I'm just going to use the 2H pencil. And what you're going to do is you're going to use a touch, push, lift, and you're going to follow the hair. Hair looks more natural when it's sketched in clumps. The clumps really don't start until we get into the next step after this one. And artists have their own way of creating hair. I like doing everything in even layers. That way it's consistent. So we're going to put a tone of 2H pencil over the entire drawing. Now you'll notice that my wrist is doing a lot of the work, and the problem with this is that, especially if you have carpal tunnel or you have some arthritis, is that you will get sore. Another way you can do that, where you use your whole upper arm, is you take your arm and create the strokes. I find myself naturally automatically using my wrist. But especially for long strokes, you can use your entire arm. But look what's happening with my hand. I'm rubbing it back and forth on here. So even if you put tracing paper here and you did that, you're eventually going to start wiping off some of the graphite. So you can hold your pencil further up the shaft, and where you're actually off the drawing, and you can do that. Okay, you'll find a method that's comfortable for you, so use that. Sometimes I combine using my wrist for some parts, then using my whole arm for some other parts. If I was creating a drawing, let's say of a horse, where we're drawing the tail or the mane, I'm using a lot more of these long freestyle strokes. Now, this is, oops, I made a boo-boo there, so I'm just going to take the eraser. If you wanted to sketch short hair, you'd be just doing short choppy strokes. The length of the stroke determines the length of the hair. Okay, so you're just going to put a tone of graphite. It doesn't have to be a perfect tone. And with hair, the more layers, the better. Now I'm using my arm. And because we're using a harder pencil, it won't smudge as easy if we worked with a darker pencil. And every time I'm finishing that stroke, I'm lifting my pencil off the paper. You may not see it because you're looking straight down, but I'm lifting my pencil straight off the paper. Every time I'm finishing that stroke, finishing that stroke, I'm lifting the pencil off. Okay, so we have a pretty even tone in there. Now, because the 2B pencil was used to show you an example, I'm going to add a few more strands with the 2B just to make it more even. You may not need to do this. Okay. This will basically act as the shadows in the hair. Now, excuse me. Now, when you're creating these strokes here, we're going to be continuing on with the same strokes over and over and over again. And now we're going to be creating the dark pockets in the hair. So with the 2B pencil, come in. And you have to make sure that your pencil's always sharp. So let's make this part here a nice dark spot. This is dark. Let's create some dark parts here. Now you can create the dark parts as actual shadows or dark tones in the hair. It all depends on the color of the hair of the person you are sketching. And if you want to sketch celebrities, and you can have a lot of fun with that, because you've got some celebrities that have so many different colors in their hair. Just remember to create your reference material from photograph, print it out in grayscale or black and white. Most modern printers all have this feature built in. Okay. I'm going to change my pencil. Let's just put a few strands like so. Now I want to show you a really neat trick. You notice that I was bringing that stroke down this way, right? Okay. Now we've got the stroke here. Let's say I want to create a dark pocket here, but I want this to be highlighted. Go in the opposite direction. And where you're going to lift off your pencil is where you want the highlight to be. So let's create this one here. And I'm going to go the exact opposite. Okay. If you feel more comfortable bringing the stroke towards you, turn your paper around. Just make sure you turn your reference material around as well. Now you see where it meets now? It's much more highlighted. And because we came in here with our 2H pencil and created a tone, you can still see the lines in here. If you don't see the lines, come back in with your 2H pencil and add some tone in there. Now that looks like a highlight. You come in and with just a little bit more pressure on some of the hairs, that looks even more natural. Now for these types of strokes here, I like pushing the stroke away from me. I'm rotating my pencil. See how nice and strong that is? Bring it down, bring it down. Come up, come up. Look at that. Whoops, drop my pencil. Then you can come in and just refine a little bit more with the 2H. And you would keep doing this more and more and more for darker and darker and darker hair. So we'll pretend that this person's hair that we're drawing is going to be two tones. So we have sometimes, like I know with my hair is black at the back and it's silver gray at the top because my hair, that's the way it's growing. So this one here will do the same thing. So we're going to pretend that this is really dark hair here and then this is light hair. So I'm going to come in, same stroke I did here, working upwards, going towards here, and the more layers I add, see how the hair is getting darker and darker? This is looking naturally lighter because my stroke is lifting off. And by doing it this way, the stroke that's being lifted off is uneven, which allows the hair to be intermingled and look highlighted. I see way too many sketches and informal drawings in graphite where everything is so flat and gray. We're lacking contrast in a lot of the drawings. So with this being said, is that I try to avoid using the blending stump when I can. In the written lesson I did use a blending stump, but I'm showing you a different technique now just to give you the biggest bang so you can learn a lot more. So with the 2H pencil I can create wispy hair. The one thing you want to try to avoid though is having the hair look like this, which is flat and boring. Put some life and energy into it, and just make sure that when you're creating your hair is that you've got some wispiness to it, and try to clump the hair together. Like this is a clump right here, this is a clump right here, and we don't really have a clump here, but it's easy enough to make one. And as we go, now if you wanted to create really dark hair, okay, you would take your blending stump at this point and blend everything out. Okay, so you would blending stump, blend everything out, which will create everything in a dark gray tone. Then you would repeat the steps, adding more graphite. But if we wanted to create light hair, I'm not going to use a blending stump. Okay, we're going just to use the pencils to do all the work. And from here now, I can go to an H pencil and I can fill in some of the areas in here. And I'm not going to really work too much at darkening some sections. This is just more to even out some of the tone, because I want to create a clump. And I'm looking here and saying, well, if you're drawing light hair, how do you create a clump when this is as dark as you want to get it? This is when you would use your eraser. Now with the vinyl eraser, it's naturally dirty. Okay, it's naturally dirty, so we need to clean it. And on scrap paper, you're gonna pull the eraser, and what that's going to do is going to bring the eraser particles to the edge, and you just wipe that off. There we go. And all you're doing is getting a really sharp edge. See there? How sharp that edge is? And then you can use that nice sharp edge. Watch this. Start at the top. And that's about all you can get, because now that it's really dirty, and you're going to go and you're going to clean it. See? You're going to clean it. And it will get to a point when you're doing this, and this is going to become very rounded. Then you would move on to other parts of the eraser. The other thing you could do is very carefully, if you're a young person, you might want to get to an adult to do this, is to use an X-Acto knife and just trim the eraser down. But you're using the eraser to create the light in the hair. So this is how we're creating some contrast, and never blow the particles. Okay, don't use your hand to wipe it away. Either tilt it over and tap it onto a garbage can, or use a brand new makeup brush, or like a brush, the goat hair brush that I have from Langnickel, and I use this strictly for my graphite drawing. So I can lift some of this out. Okay, see how that's really getting dirty? Now you also have the kneadable eraser. Now the kneadable eraser, you can get much finer threads in there. So I'm going to really focus right here, and what this is going to do is going to make this part of the hair look like it's on top of this part. Go right over. And it's naturally removing this clump here, and then I can come in with my, I'll use my H, and now go around and create that clump of hair. The more times you come in with your eraser, lift out the light, come in with a pencil, draw more strokes, lift out the light. So I come in, I can lift out some more light, come back in, draw some more strokes. You're adding so many layers of hair, it's going to become more natural. Okay, there we go. But what I'm lacking here now is I'm lacking some contrast, so I can go in now with a darker pencil and right under here, touch, push, lift. So I'm creating a shadow, and I will have to come in probably with the eraser to touch that up. So now that's the way to create some shadow under hair. There we go. Okay, and we can create this quite dark if you wanted to, but we're drawing lighter hair, remember. So I'm not going to create this so dark. And there's also different shapes of hair. Okay, and I can come back in with my eraser and lift out some more light, come back in and put some line back in. Because when you're using the eraser, you're lifting out some of that light, but you need to put some of it back. So then for that, I like using either the 2H or the H pencil. And then we can come in and we can, where's my 2B? Create some dark, just some strands of dark hair, or some little shadows. Okay. And let's see. Bring that up just a little bit more. And what this is going to do now is going to create a really dark spot in here. And if you find that when you're doing this you added too much graphite, come back in with your eraser and just touch. Just form the eraser into whatever size you want. Like if you want a ball, and you can just do touch, and the touch will just remove the top layer of graphite. But you have to come in with either another pencil to blend out those eraser marks, or come in with your blending stump. Now watch. So you can see with the blending stump, it's turning gray. You have to be careful with the blending stump. Although I love using it, you have to be careful sometimes that you don't over muddy an area and where it turns too gray. Okay. Now, this end right here, if you want to taper that off, use the H pencil and finish that stroke this way. There we go. So you can picture the face being here, or this could be the side of the hair. These are just bangs, and the eye could be right about here. The eye would be here. This is just bangs coming over. Okay. Now the face map that I gave you, the blank face and the face map is for longer hair. So you'll be able to really practice these strokes. So at this part here, you could stop, and this will be your darker hair, or sorry, your light to mid-tone hair. If you wanted to make it really dark, you would then go to your darker pencils, and all you're going to do is add more tone. So if I wanted to create a dark patch right here, okay. And now I'm just creating darker hair. All right, get a sharper pencil. And when you're drawing the hair, you're of course going to be looking at your reference material when you're doing this. Now, if you do happen to have, let's say, carpal tunnel or arthritis, and as you're doing your sketching, let's say you find your wrist a little bit sore, just stop. There's no point in drawing, if you're having some pain, because it's going to show in your artwork, and on top of that, you're going to be in pain. One nice exercise to do before you start drawing is to knead your kneadable eraser. Okay, just knead it, and that'll help stretch out the muscles in your hands. And so now we're getting into darker hair. Okay, very lit up right here. I think it's, for me, it's too much light, so I'm just going to bring in, and this is for long flowing hair. Okay. Now, to show you, I'm coming with a 6B pencil. The 6B pencil is used to enhance the really dark parts of the hair. Use this sparingly though, okay? So you could use this pencil where, like, where the part in the hair, let's say if, let's just by chance say the reference material you're working from is from a photograph of somebody who, let's say they color their hair and they haven't done their roots. So you could use this technique. You could also use this technique to create the shadows in the hair or darker, let's say two-tone hair. Okay. And when you get to the light areas, come in with a lighter pencil. Hair is a lot of fun, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but as you're creating this hair, you can use this technique to sketch animals as well. Long grass. Long grass would be a lot more rustic feeling though, but here we go. So there's a nice example of drawing, sketching out here. Now if you were doing this in charcoal, you would do the same thing, but you would use your fingers to blend out a lot of the spots. The one last thing I want to do is I really want to show you how to really punch up this light here. So I'm going to change the 6B pencil, go to something sharper. And it's hard to do this though when if you need to erase. So with the 6B pencil, make sure that you've got everything down in its place, because the 6B pencil is very hard to erase. Just creating a very dark patch in here. See how dark that is? So think of this being the hair, and then this just being the bangs, and the eye would actually be right in here, slightly covered up. So we can then, like we did before, can come in here and just use the eraser just just pull out some light. Now the eraser as well, you can see if I do this here, if I don't fold it over, the graphite's just dirty there, it acts a bit like the blending stump, where I'm kind of lifting up the graphite, but I'm also smushing it around at the same time. So if you find that you're doing this and your graphite's just moving around a little bit, that's because your eraser is dirty. I would then come in with, let's say, a 5H or 2H or H pencil. If I've lifted up too many lines, just come back in and put them in. Some artists will actually leave it blank on the paper. That's their style. Myself, no, I want to see the texture in the hair. My sketches and drawings are much more realistic, and I want the detail. But if you prefer not seeing the detail, that is totally fine. No problem at all. You'll find that as you get more practice, you'll develop your own style, and that's what I want for you, is to develop your own style and what works for you. I'm just showing you what works for me. And I can, you know, in 5 years, if I were to do this again, I may be using a different technique. Because as time goes on, you'll find different ways of doing things, and you'll adapt the style to something different. You may prefer doing stuff that's more abstract and less realistic, or vice versa. So do whatever works for you. There we go. And then you would just basically work from there. You can create, you know, keep adding more layers if you really want dark hair, or leave it the way it is for really light hair. Add a little bit more tone, like I'm doing now with the H pencil. This is now going to be more mid-tone hair. But anytime you want to find out exactly what type of values you have, like what pencils you should be using in that, just print your photograph in grayscale or black and white on your printer, and that'll be your guide as to what pencils to use for whatever you're drawing. All right, so that ends that. Now just get the other one, okay, just to see two very different sketches, but you can see much lighter hair, much darker hair, and much coarser hair. So that will also help with the type of hair that you're drawing. Okay, some people have very fine hair, some people have very coarse hair. Okay, so that'll help as well. Okay, so that concludes the actual facial features. And now what I want to do is go on to the next step, which is just basically a brief explanation on how to use the templates that I've provided for facial mapping. So in this segment, we're really not doing any drawing. Well, I'm not. You are. I want to show you the templates that I've provided. There are two. There's the blank face, and then there's the face mapping. And what these are basically is to give you opportunities to take what you've learned and sketch it onto an actual facial shape. So in this one here, this is a very rough sketch in here, and this is basically to show you what to look for. So if you take, once you've done this exercise, to keep practicing, is look at photographs, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to generally sketch out the shape of the face, okay? And then you're going to map the eyes, nose, and mouth. Now I will tell you, formal drawing courses, like I've got one that I put together. They're long, because when you start getting into the fine tuning of sketching and drawing, you get into anatomy, and which is beyond the scope of these lessons. So I've provided the template to give you a face to work with, so you can put together a portrait. The one thing that when you do some research on the anatomy of a face, the general consensus is, on an average face, you take the width of the eye, and that is your base measurement. And the width of the face is 5 eyes. So the distance between here to here is the same distance between here and here, here, and then here and here. That's the general face. As well, the general face is 7 eyes long. So if you were to do a drawing or sketch, mark that on 5x7 paper, and you can put little tick measurements, 5 inches and 7 inches. That will be a really good way to measure. The other thing for general measurement, if I just grab my ruler, and I'll put the shiny side down so you don't get a reflection, that usually the edge of the eye roughly lines up with the edge of the mouth. But the more accurate measurement is the center of the pupil, or the edge of the pupil measures with the actual tip of the mouth. Okay, so that could be one way to measure it. The other way to measure is that the corners of the eye to the center of the mouth. So the eye, get a pencil, the edge of the eye, if you formed a triangle, the edge of the eye touches the edge of the nose, goes to the middle of the mouth, and it would be the same here. This is on a general shape, on basically a perfect face. And when you do a measure, so you've got also the halfway mark, and then you go another halfway mark, halfway, a third of the way. There's all these different measurements that you can do, and it does get quite complicated. Right now, to get your feet wet is work with the map that I gave you, because that way you can practice. As long as the photograph you're looking at, the person's looking straight at you, you can use this facial map. Okay, and I'm going to put this one aside, because this is basically what to sketch out when creating your own map. So I've got this sketch here, and basically the exercises for the facial features will fit right into here, and they are in proper proportion. And then you just have to basically try different things with hair. So whatever photograph that you look at for practice, just use that photograph to map out just for the eyes, nose, and mouth, and then the hair, but place it onto here because this is already in proportion. And this will basically give you a finished portrait. The only thing it's missing is the actual tone. So in a lot of the exercises where we created tone is that you would basically add in some of that tone. And for example, the nose, you could put that nose on here, and all on the outside here, all this tone, you would basically just sketch that in with, let's say, a 5H pencil. Same with this mouth, or this mouth. I can put this mouth in here. Okay, I can put this mouth in here. I can put this eye in here, this mouth. So I can do, the only one is this one here, the eye is looking more on an angle, and that's because of the shape of the iris versus the highlight. But again, I wouldn't use this nose or this nose because these are semi-profile and profile. You want to use something that's facing towards you. And this is of an ape, so you're not going to use that, but you could use this eye as well. So as long as the photograph you're using for practice is facing straight on, then you can use this facial map. And what you're going to do is you can transfer the facial map onto drawing paper, but I didn't transfer the actual eyes, okay, because I just want to show you how light it is, and that's basically what you're working with. When you're excuse me, when you're transferring the eyes, use the lightest pencil and basically transfer just rough little tick marks where these features are, because then you're going to use your own photograph and create your own line drawing, and you're going to map it out very carefully. Now, one great way of mapping out perfect proportions for transferring is using a grid system. Now, I have a demonstration, a free demonstration on my website called myloveaffairwithlife.com. It shows you how to take a photograph, create a grid for your own line drawing, which is in perfect proportion. That's a free video that you can watch. And then you would just basically map everything out and go from there. But basically, from the eye lesson, the nose, the mouth, and the hair, you can use this facial map to create your own portrait. And the only real thing that you would need to adjust is the shape of the hair. So this is just basically an idea. The neck is already put in there, so you can create the hair long, short, whatever way you want. But use this template to create different portraits as you practice all the facial features that we covered. So we're all done. Did you have fun? I hope so. Now the only way to improve your skills is to practice, practice, practice. And to help you with that, I'd like to invite you to visit my website at myloveaffairwithlife.com. And what you'll find on there is a variety of things that are for creative inspirations, free tutorials, free videos, full classes and workshops that you can try, different mediums, a whole bunch of different things, and basically, if you're on that website, you will never be bored because there's always something to do. All right, so I'd like to invite you to check that out. And I really hope that you will push along and practice the skills that you've learned so far. Visit the website, get a whole bunch of different other information to help you along. And I would love to get your feedback. And on the website, you can sign up for my newsletter. I announce different projects that are free tutorials and stuff like that. And I would love to see the artwork that you've created in today's workshop. So until then, stay inspired, and I will see you next time.